Yeah, she's calling back. We're going to try to give her a call again, and then she just added another phone number to the 13-year-old grandson who's possibly with the daughter. Step out with this.
2412.
Veteran crisis hotline's calling in, so they have a female veteran off her medication. She's at work to Safe Haven. You're checking 12, we'll check that one out.
6 Rumble, 2 1 start, take your shot.
Officer still stands for talk? No. Offender in custody? Temporary with thanks. Anyone else close, wait to see result, let me know. Some first time out. 10-4. 422, you guys are okay over there? Shot there. Alright, DT doesn't take pictures of the, is the domestic related? She's calling back. We're going to try to give her a call again, and then she just added another phone number to the 13-year-old grandson who's possibly with the daughter. Stop out with this.
2412.
Veteran crisis hotline's calling in, so they have a female veteran off her medication. She's at work to Safe Haven. You're checking 12, we'll check that one out.
6 Rumble, 2 1 start, take your shot.
Officer still stands for talk? No. Offender in custody? Anyone else close, wait to see result, let me know.
Supervisor,
Oh, there we go. Oh, I'm so excited for tonight. I'm so excited. Yoli knows because what time was I messaging you last
Late.
night that
Late.
it was like, what, midnight, 1 a.m.? I was like, Yoli, I feel like reading these transcripts right
now. I gotta go to bed.
right? I'm like,
Yeah.
Yoli, what are you doing? What are you doing? Now? It's bedtime. Yeah, I could not wait to read these transcripts. You guys have read them. What do you if you haven't read them and you're in chat, your mind is going to be blown. It makes me think of the title from way back at the beginning when I first started talking about it. The title called Questions and Contradictions. That was like a little series I did in the beginning, and it was all about all the inconsistencies and the confusion, you know. What do you guys think when you read the documents? I'll go Yoli first.
Well, I mean, I read them and it gets very confusing with the DNA. Like, I don't totally understand, some of the things that they're saying. I mean, I maybe Audrey can help us out a little bit, because I know that the STR turns into the SNP, but there's some things that were said in the transcript, like where Payne says that the FBI told him that it was not Brian Koberger's DNA, that it was a source. And I'm thinking, okay, what does that mean, a source? Does that mean, I just get confused with that. That's all. But there was some other interesting tidbits. The vacuum.
Right? The Bissell backpack.
Oh my God. CJ was laughing about that long time ago. He was saying, would this guy take a Bissell backpack and vacuum?
I know, like the Ghostbusters, and I was even doing the as I'm backing away. Yeah, it's crazy stuff. Audrey, what'd you think about when you read the documents, the transcript?
Well, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I should have realized this, but I didn't. But I put it all together when I was hearing, I think it was Riley Nolan. She was saying that there was a mixture from the Pennsylvania trash. And of course, that's going to be a mixture because it's trash. That's the nature of it. There's so many things in there. So I just felt like, oh, I probably should have known that. But it didn't occur to me until I heard it.
Well, plus with it being a gated community, they had to have the trash man bring the trash out to them in order for them to collect it. And who says this guy that's I don't think he went to school for contamination, did he? What'd you think, Kathy, when you read him? I'm so excited tonight. I'm so excited.
And Kathy, you're awesome. I love it. Because I listen to your updates. I don't comment, but I mean, I listen to your updates when I'm in a hurry. And it just kind of helps to keep track.
Oh, Yoli, thank you.
Yeah, I do. I listen. I do listen.
Hi,
and especially when you're just describing the document, I want to know what it is. I don't have to go to that darn website and scroll all the way down. And I mean,
Well, Yoli, I'm glad you pointed that out, because one of the benefits that I think is really helpful is that people can just go into, there's a couple of where my show is, listen notes, and also I think YouTube, you just plug in a search term. If you want to plug in like change of venue or whatever, affidavit of probable cause, Pennsylvania, it'll pull them all up for you. And it will tell you exactly where on that docket, because that docket's a mess. It is unsearchable. And, there's thousands of documents on there.
It's
but
crazy.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm happy about that. I do. Yeah, because it's hard to keep up on what's going on.
Yeah, it is. When you go to the docket, you're scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and so many times I find myself accidentally going to the next name after it because I keep scrolling so much, right? And it's like, what other case do you see it like this? It's just nuts, especially the supplemental requests for discoveries.
Oh yeah, I didn't.
Yeah,
You know?
some of the things, CJ, you bring up is Judge Stephen J. Hippler. Could we please just call it the pretrial and trial order, not the redacted and the trial setting? It's some of the things on the docket don't really logically refer to what you're looking for. CJ, do you remember the days when you'd go to the Idaho cases of judicial interest? Koberger would be right there at the top. It would be maybe, whatever, 10 or 20 different things. But
Daybell
now you
was right
do.
underneath, yeah.
You do. You got to go down so far. And then I've done that myself, CJ, where I go past it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
wait, what?
What, there's an
Yeah,
appeal?
You go to another name that just popped up, you're like, oh shoot, because you get used to going past it on accident, and you get used to, oh, it's that name, I gotta go back up,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's it's the same way the PCA route was done. When you look at it, really, it's stuff that's thrown together that is very confusing. It's not even properly documented. And it just creates that confusion that makes you have to do the work yourself. And I think that's why I've always said they just took the tip and ran with it from back then, because really that's literally what they did, and they were expecting everybody else to do the work. Because when your second in command first shows up at the scene of the crime, and before he gets out of his car, calls Idaho State Police because he knows that they won't be able to handle the situation, that right there tells me that they didn't do nothing. But because it happened in Moscow and they invited all of these other agencies, they were the, quote, lead investigation when it comes to it, as Fry liked to say back then and stress it quite often, that they were in control of the investigation. It was their investigation. They didn't do anything, though. They relied on all these other people to do it, and when they have to do it, then you see all this chaos, just like the PCA.
Well, it's funny you bring that up, because when I started the podcast a year ago, it was just with the intention of just going, and Audrey remembers, because she and I sat there, she had her markers out, she had her pen, and we literally went through it page by page, the PCA. Well, yesterday through this morning, I'm going through this 175-page document and orally narrating it. So it was like, my eyes are still blinded. I can't see because it's 175 pages, but it is full circle. It's so amazing. I mean, having read this, and there's so much information in here. I'm dying to hear what Audrey says. A lot of the DNA stuff went over my head,
I do too, because I get confused. Like, I know CJ and I a long time ago, we went over it and we went over all the steps, and I knew it at that time because we went over it, and I thought, man, this is it. I mean, there's a lot of steps. I mean, I think, but I don't, I mean, I just would like some more explanation on the DNA stuff, because I did a video on the trash, and I thought, the PCA doesn't talk about, like, where did they get the trash from? Like, what kind of trash they got? Like, what item they tested? Right. And I know that Ann Taylor was asking about that in the hearing, and I don't think they knew. Did they know? I can't
Riley Nolan, sort of. I mean, she was probably the one who was most familiar with it, although she didn't do the testing. She said she saw the sheath, and what she described it was that they pulled a bag, and then she kind of, like, I don't know if it was speaking generally or if it was she said they pulled a water bottle, something else, or it might have just been an example, but that would be the one to go to in this entire section, because she spoke about the trash pull the most. But what I was really interested, the thing that got me is Matthew Gamet, who's also from ISP. I had no idea. I mean, this is what you're learning here by looking at this document finally, that Matthew Gannett, he's also an official with ISP. he and an unnamed Moscow Police Department officer took the DNA sample from, I guess it was the ISP lab. They went, they literally brought it down together to
Yeah.
Texas. So I'm waiting, CJ. I'm waiting for Monday because we have the in limine motions. I'm wondering if there's going to, Audrey, we've spoken about this before. You know, I mean, do you think there's going to be a chain of custody issue here? You know, I mean, you're going that far over state lines, and I think that that's just a minefield for potential chain of custody issue.
This is why I have to keep bringing this up. Okay. And I'll just show a couple photos. I'm not going to show the video. I'm not going to show all this, but really when we're talking about the DNA dirty gloves, you're seeing the same people in you're seeing the same people inside the crime scene photographing, inspecting. You know, they were inspecting these items inside the crime scene. They had to document everything with photos. When you see this lady out here, the same lady that's doing the documentation, and also, I have to say, inspecting the items, and the same equipment was being touched by this same glove before it even went in there. This is why it reminds me of the OJ trial so much, because of the contamination that took place that was able to be shown. And they didn't, and it's going to be just like this. They were able to show you in the OJ trial literally contamination of key items,
like
on
shoes,
video. Yes,
there was shoes on a manila folder that they were taking out,
and he put it in the back seat of the cop car. He didn't even have it in a bag. You know, Kathy, you bring up the transport of the DNA sample, right? What did they do with OJ's DNA? They had it in a freaking trunk for a day, and one of the lead investigators carried it around to another crime scene.
CJ, they maybe did that within a 40-mile radius. We're talking here. They literally, first off, Moscow to the ISP lab in Meridian is what, maybe 300 miles. Then they decide these two guys we don't know if they flew or if they drove. It doesn't say in this transcript, but they went to Houston, Texas with it. You're going to tell me the way that you dictated, you always pointed out, look, they're dropping the gloves, they're doing this, they're doing that. Are you telling me that every single step cross states, or if they went through an airport, if they had to go through a metal detector, what did that do to the DNA? I think I'm expecting the in limine motion. Hopefully they won't be under seal, but I think there's going to be a challenge on chain of custody. That's their whole case. That's the evidence right there.
That's all they got. And that's why I'm saying, when you can show contamination before somebody even comes in the crime scene, because those items didn't get tested until after this contamination took place.
Yeah, and then the students the students were called over before the law enforcement came, so we don't know what they did when they got there, what DNA they may have left there or not, or I have no idea whether that, I don't even know how you would even segregate all the DNA that was in that house.
Especially when you send everybody home early. You didn't even wait until Thanksgiving. You just sent them home early.
And the explanation that Payne gave about how he loaded Brian Koberger's DNA onto CODIS, but then he couldn't do it because he couldn't do the other ones because then it would wipe out Brian Koberger's DNA in the. I didn't understand that at all.
Well, according to Judge Stephen J. Hippler, Detective Brett Payne was a commendable and a highly, believable witness.
Yeah, well,
with all the I don't remembers.
Yeah, see, I knew that the I don't remembers and I don't know. You have to have a little bit more than that to get to like a violation of, that it has to be more. Like what I see is that like just generally. They were sloppy. The paperwork was sloppy. You had affidavits with the name of affidavit of Detective Mowry, and it was actually Payne's affidavit, or vice versa. You had a lot of mistakes on the piece in the PCA, and the thing is did it rise to the level of misrepresentation? And it wasn't clear. I thought that Ann Taylor was trying to make an argument, but it wasn't clear how. I mean, it just wasn't clear, because of course they're going to say they don't remember, they don't know. They're not going to incriminate themselves. They're not going to say, oh, well, we made that up.
Yeah, they're not going to incriminate the real footprint, because Kohberger ain't wearing size 9, and isn't that a pair of Vans shoes right there in that bag?
He's got, I think it's like size 12 from the inventory in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It was size 12
I have a size
shoes
12.
that he wore. Those
And
banana
I'm not
boats,
even
right?
6.
Right.
I'm not even 6 foot, and I wear size 12.
What about Leah? I was real impressed with Leah Larkin's testimony. She was the last one, but she just came in and she said she quite frankly doesn't know how in 9 days they found Kohberger. She says it takes a lot longer than 9 days, because now we know finally it was the 22nd after they took the whirlwind trip across the country with this precious DNA that the Texas lab began working on the 22nd. They were told on the 10th to stop. And Larkin says she doesn't understand how in 9 days they went from where they were with Othram to identifying Brian Kohberger within 9. She testified to that. It's just this, everyone out there, whatever you do, it's a long read, but there's so much information in here, and it's great. I mean, we've all complained about how secret this case is. To finally get some details, and some information.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been reading it off and on. I haven't totally read everything, but just what I mean, the whole thing about the vacuum, it just, and then the person says, I'm here to help, and then that person was wearing a mask, a ski mask, I guess now it's a ski mask. Before it was just the mask covering his mouth, but it's a ski mask, and coming in and saying, I'm here to help with the vacuum.
Yeah. What about the BLOOD on the rail? Now we have definitive, concrete evidence here in this transcript. It wasn't from 2. I imagined it would be from 2 to 3. It was from 1 to 2. That's where that print came, that unknown male sample. It is on the railing, that long stairwell from 1 to 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because when I showed the dirty DNA, I've always told, you watch that video. I have to. You watch that video, you can see the people looking over the rail. You see the lady with the short brown hair looking down.
Yes.
And you see a gentleman that's right by that half wall, leaning over the half wall, looking down. Of course, that's where, because the lady that has the ponytail comes around and takes photos over there. She also, and check this out, that same lady with the ponytail, also when they're going from the kitchen to DM's room, they don't even make a giant leap step or anything. It's just regular walk in, regular walk through the doorway where the good vibe light sign is. There was you can't tell me there wasn't some kind of trail on those steps or in that kitchen area, because if you're intersecting, especially right in front of DM's door, you're gonna intersect at some point. And to sit there and to think that there wasn't even where that latent footprint was supposed to be at or was at, there's not some kind of collection in a cross traffic area. Right. And they just walked. There was the way that they were inside handling that crime scene was just so relaxed, and I don't understand it, because that's something that crime right there. Listen, it may be a normal thing for people up there with the skin and the animals.
Mm.
That's one thing, but it's another thing when 4 college students are brutally attacked that way, and the people that are there to do that job to make sure that everything is done properly
Right.
aren't even showing up like it's the NBA finals. Like, what the hell are you
Right.
doing?
Well, don't be surprised if that one with the ponytail didn't actually do the testing. I don't know if they, it's
Yeah.
we know
She
said
was
it's a
part of
female.
she was, yeah, and that's
But
why I
Riley
said,
Nolan said it was a female tech who tested the swab, who
yeah.
did, tested the sheath and pulled or extracted the DNA supposedly. And we've got some clarification here. She used the term touch DNA a couple times. That's Riley Nolan. That's the horse's mouth right there from ISP.
Yeah,
Well, of course, she's
she was
going
part
to
of
do
the
that.
search in Washington too.
She's the prosecution, and from what I understand, it was a prosecutor who started that touch DNA word phrase, and it does tell a story. It would confuse me the first time I'm hearing it. It's to convince a jury the defendant touched a key piece of evidence. So she is going to use that term to reinforce, all the work that they're doing.
As opposed to transfer DNA, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's why paying attention to the words that the attorneys say is important, and it's not necessarily evident. I mean, it's not evidence what the attorneys say, and
It's
but
their
yeah, that's
interpretation,
true. Yeah. Interesting.
And she was part of the search in Koberger's apartment in Washington State as well.
Who, Riley Nolan?
This lady that's picking up this glove.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay,
I'm not
Riley
gonna. I'm
Nolan's
not
the
saying
supervisor.
names. I'm not saying names because you can get in trouble.
No,
for
we're
some of the-
talking. I mean, it's on the public transcript right here. I don't know who she is, but she was the second person on the witness stand. It was Brett Payne, then it was Riley Nolan, then it was Matthew Gamet. He's the person who took the DNA with the unnamed Moscow Police Department official to Othram, and then there was Daniel Hellwig. He was from some 501c not-for-profit. Boy, oh boy, did he speak with the DNA terms there, Audrey. And then finally, Leah Larkin.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, when I don't know. That's why I said, like, this whole suppression being denied, it wasn't a big deal to me. It was expected. And when you're looking at this right here, this is what in trial, it doesn't matter who you're trying to charge. It doesn't matter what crime you're talking about. When you're looking at this right here and how that was transferred into the crime scene.
Mm-hmm.
It just goes to contamination. The whole, it's impossible for that house not to have been contaminated. And, the sheath, I thought about it and I thought, the sheath could have come off of somebody when they were struggling, if there was a struggle. But we haven't linked the sheath to the knife that did the unalivings. I don't know. I mean, if it was under her bed, could it have been one of the girls that had it?
That's why-
CJ's theory is, CJ, that was your theory, right?
Yeah, sleeping with a knife under her bed. I mean, because it's crazy there.
I mean, I used the house tour, and I basically played the scene of the crime out to you, how it took place, how this person came in, how Kaylee was, how it happened, how it fell down there, how it got there. I mean,
And then
because it's all about reasonable doubt.
Right. The DNA was also on the inside of the button, it said.
Right. Yes.
Is that where the metal or the brass is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And does DNA, I heard, and I don't know if it's true because I don't know, that DNA degrades faster when it's on brass?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So we're the moment that the first Moscow PD and what we learned from the order denying that Judge Hippler has confirmed, I thought it was a team of 3 of them that went in. He's saying he he's calling him an officer like it's just one that went in and found all four. So by the time he's entering that building, it's almost 8 hours later.
Yeah.
How much degradation had happened just in that part and that time
Yeah.
frame?
Yeah,
Well,
all the time that was waiting.
I remember Brett Payne saying he was appointed lead detective after 24 hours. But
Right.
we all know that the first 24 hours is the most important time. So that's weird.
I'm glad you brought that up, Audrey, because that also, there was a lot of just speculation going on that somebody else was the lead detective and then they either quit or retired or something like that. There was some, no, but Brett Payne said he was within 24 hours. They picked him to be the lead detective on this case. So we're getting a lot of like speculation dealt with here with this transcript.
Well, you know, the thing about the judge's orders is that it's referencing, okay, so it's referencing testimony that was on the stand.
Right.
It's referencing exhibits that are attached to the motions, which we do not have access to. And it's referencing, you know, the law oral argument. So it's
Right.
it's a mixture of stuff, and it's like part of it we know, part of it we don't know. And he makes reference to certain things, exhibits, and so it's just I don't know, it's messy to me the way this whole thing was done, because I felt bad for the attorneys, because when they had that closed hearing and then they came out to argue, they were going to argue facts that were in the closed hearing. So how do you do that? Like, you're arguing and then you have to like, oh, I can't say that.
Right.
You know, it's just it's not conducive to how you argue. You need to be able to fully argue the facts, you know, even though they were sealed. So either make it all sealed or make it all public. I mean, it's just one or the other. I get frustrated because it's like half and half, and it's just, well, then people are going to speculate. That's what you're going to get.
Yeah.
Well, that's the problem. I think that the gag order, whatever good that they thought it might do, it's done so much bad. I mean, just the wild theories, and I mean, it's great to have a theory. You know, we
how
all have
long,
theories,
too.
but it's just, you know, from one end, whether, you know, you believe it, you know, more towards the evidence. We don't even have the evidence, but
You could
lean
have
more
so
toward
many.
guilt.
You could have theories to talk for years. That's why,
Yeah.
and you know, for the last couple years, we've all heard all the different kinds of theories that and there's a lot of people rehashing the, you know, and it's just like, holy hell, you know, there's just so much. It becomes overwhelming in a way, you
Well,
know.
it does, and then you lose track of what is it
The real
that's the
facts, the real
true,
facts,
right? What's
right,
the real facts, and what
right,
is some made up BS,
right.
you know, that's been put out there? It's so I agree, Yoli. I don't know how she, you know, you could just see her up there. I remember when she was talking and trying to do her argument. She, oh, I don't know if I can say that, you know,
Yeah,
and it's like,
it was a mess. It was a mess, and
Yeah.
I really don't think the judge intended it that way, but I think he realized it at some point, and then that's why he made the transcript available. But you know,
Thank God.
It's really unfair to both sides, actually, not just the defense, but both sides, because you know like when Jennings was arguing about the cell tower, and she said the third cell tower, and he was like stopping her, like, I have no idea. It just sounded very strange. It was an argument that I probably, like I said, I probably would have said, well, Your Honor, you want me to argue here the law and facts, and the facts were covered under a seal, and I can't argue those facts here openly. So how am I supposed to argue this to make a record for appeal?
It's just weird. I mean, and she said that, you know, there's a fascinating part of this transcript at the end, about the last 9 or 10 pages. The defense or the state was supposed to call a witness, and for some reason Nye said, I'm not going to call Dr. Mulligan or whatever his name was. And so, okay, and then they started Hippler's now wanting to just, let's go over a few things. Let's talk about now. We got to let the Idaho Supreme Court know, to let the public know that we're within 15, 20 minutes. Make sure we don't say this. We're going to use that. It was crazy.
Yeah, and the one thing that I did notice, which is kind of, I think that's lack of resources on the defense part, but
yeah,
they had told Anne, look, in the closed hearing, you need to get your exhibits in order, because she kept saying the exhibits are attached to the motions that we're using.
Right.
And the judge kept saying, you need to get your exhibits in order. I'm not going to be searching these motions to look for exhibits. You need to get your exhibits in order so that I can refer to them and it's clear on the record.
Right.
Look, I would have stayed up all night and made an exhibit book, and so that it could be easier for the judge, with a list like exhibit S2 attached to motion, blah, blah, blah. And then there's a tab, which,
you make it easy. I mean, and especially after they got their hands slapped back in November, when they just threw together, it sounds like just a mishmash. They dumped 1,000 or 2,000 pages in Hippler's lap for the first Frank's motion. With this, when he's like, you didn't itemize it, you didn't mark it, you're giving me repeated emails. My job is, and he cited case, my job is not to go fish through, because you got to pinpoint to the record, as Yoli. So then she's going to come into the hearing and basically repeat that. I remember that. I thought
it should have been done already.
That didn't look good.
It should have been done already. It should have been done even if you weren't handing it to him. It should have been done for you. That way you're effective. That way you're effective in the courtroom.
Because you can't expect the judge to be going to every motion and going to the exhibit. No, you need to tell the judge, like, for the purposes of this hearing, exhibit S12 is marked as exhibit A to this hearing. Like that kind of thing.
Yeah, especially, I mean, she had 14, 15 motions.
And it's
14 suppression motions and then one for Frank's here. Yeah. So it's like, how did she even keep herself, organized?
Well, that's why you heard a lot of paper ruffling. That's why they were like back and forth, and it was kind of sad. I mean, I felt bad, but he had talked. See, I didn't know he had talked to them already. During the closed hearing, and when I was hearing the open hearing, I was like, oh my God. But
it was like, and you bring up a good point, Yoli, because he said, I had always remember when the first thing that she thought she was going to argue the Frank's motion, he wanted to do the suppression, or it was the other way around. He said in closed session, we're going to start with this motion. So I don't know if she just was overwhelmed or just, but I mean, and that you get up and you start a presentation and the judge, we were going to do it on this. That's not a good way to start. Then you everything else afterwards, you're flustered.
Yeah, she was just like, oh, I didn't know, like, and I felt for her, because I know, well, first of all, I know that
thrown off guard,
Yeah. And I know that I know what it's like to be up there, and I know that the lack of resources, but some people, I mean, will stay up all night. I would have
too, something important like, and then I'm sorry, I had to say this, but which JJ, I mean, he's like, he wasn't even sitting at the defense table. He was back there. I didn't think he was there. He's like laughing on his computer and stuff. Help her out, man.
But he's been that let's be honest though, if anybody's watched him from the beginning, you remember he always seemed like he was never really prepared anyway. I wasn't
even know he was there. I didn't even know he was there.
He looked like a guest. Yeah, he looked like a guest.
It looked like he was on Twitter or something. Laughing
and then he comes up and he's trying to argue something, and it's like, bro, you're just a little part of this long hearing, and it was hard to follow.
CJ, what about when he walked in late for the DP motions? Remember,
this is what I'm saying. Like from the beginning, if you really go to the beginning hearings from the very beginning in 23, and watch how this dude is performing.
But one thing to be in front of Judge was a lot more relaxed,
right?
A lot more.
But
you're
still,
going to do this with Judge Hippler. Judge Hippler, and going to fly with him.
Listen, no. It's just like, and I want to bring up about the snap the brass, because nobody really talks about it anymore when it comes to the type of material that the skin cells were found on, which is the brass. Speaking of brass, because it does deteriorate very quickly, would that not make this even more plausible when it comes to transfer? Because when the reason I had Vinny holding that picture up is because when they're touching this, touching all their equipment, right? And then they're going in there and they're doing this because they're also inspecting the items at the crime scene. Would that not be how that would get there? And then when you really think about how quick it deteriorates on brass, it makes that whole theory even more plausible.
But wait a second. If it deteriorates so fast, then it had to have been recent that
They didn't even test it for what?
No.
3 weeks? Is that right, Audrey? Like 3 weeks they didn't even test the knife sheath.
Yeah, it shouldn't have been there. So yeah, it would have been placed a lot later for it to have survived and been present.
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, because brass, it goes quick. So and with them not testing it until a few weeks later, that really how did it get there then? Because really, if you look at brass and how quick it deteriorates, well, then you got to go back and look at this again because this is fresh.
Yeah.
This is, and I think that this, a lot of people were saying, "Oh my gosh, one of the defense attorneys is no longer going to be consulting," and it's like, what you got Becca Barlow coming aboard. She was one of the main reasons why they helped to convince Judge to turn.
I wish it was Vargas.
Discovery.
I wish it was Vargas because I like
Gabriella Vargas. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
But Becca Barlow's going to be able to argue this DNA a little bit more to make some sense. I mean,
she was honest. She was honest. She was like, "Yeah, I've been around where that kind of things happen. I've heard about it happening where they've done it."
And then the FBI was at her house the next day.
That's why, because she was being honest about it, and that's why I'm like, yes, she is awesome. Becca is too.
Becca Barlow's the attorney, right?
Becca Barlow's the attorney. She joined Gabriella Vargas is not. Yeah, I think Gabriella Vargas is the one who got visited by the feds. Not Becca. She's out of California, major player out there.
She was but during that same court hearing, she was also there too.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They were all there together, and there was a gentleman. I can't remember his name
because he was an attorney from Delaware or something.
He was first.
Exactly.
Stephen Mercer.
Remember his name.
Mercer, yeah.
Yes, what a good memory.
Yes, that's him. Yeah, it was. I wish they would have had better audio because that was the one. That was the one court hearing from, I think, wasn't it June of 23?
It was around that time
when they had that court hearing. Oh my gosh, the audio was the worst it had ever been.
It was like once they kicked out
it was bad.
Once they kicked out the media coalition got kicked out, and it went to just the I was going to say Ada County, the late talk. The only person you saw was Judge. Everybody, I didn't even know it was Brian Koberger sitting there.
Because that's where this whole coffee cup thing started, was because because they weren't covering Koberger's face, and they were still waiting to decide on if they were going to allow cameras in the courtroom or not. And I wanted to show the courts, like, look, if court TV ain't going to abide by your wishes, at least I will. So please don't not let cameras, because I always knew that this case was going to be important to have cameras in it, because everybody needs the clarity when it comes to what took place. Yeah. And so I was doing whatever I could. Most of the time, I didn't even get to watch the court hearing because I had to sit here and wait on this to tap it or not. And they would like zoom so crazy.
They would zoom in on his hands, on his face,
his nostril.
We went from that to then once they went to the late talk, you couldn't even see that it was Ann Taylor. You couldn't tell. I mean, it was like that must be okay. I guess it must be Brian Koberger. You see a guy there with dark hair, it must be him, and the long blonde hair. But I mean, you couldn't tell who. And then the sound was bad too. I think it's a little bit better here, but.
And then they were focusing the camera to his pants, like crotch area.
Yeah.
Come on.
It was
That's when
nuts.
CJ came up with the CJ coffee cup.
Yeah, I was very
Oh,
impressed.
yeah,
I hadn't been on panel or I hadn't talked to him yet, but I started watching him because I thought, wow, that's good. He's at
No, he
least
did.
Because it's
gonna.
important.
Can we just interject? Like, I mean, one of the bombshells. Come on, has to be the Four Brothers thing. You know, and we got a little taste of it with the order denying the IGG DNA suppression motion. But let's just say Judge Hippler was a little understated with what happened there.
I don't understand that with the Four Brothers.
He just basically said there were these four brothers. They came out as possibly Oh, and by the way, not the same name as Koberger. All you people out there that are going to start searching them. Not the same name.
Oh my gosh! I remember there was like one of them was like an SK or something. Remember, there was like twin brothers or something. This was from the very beginning.
No, this is in the suppression motion denial when Hippler introduced us to the fact that Othram came up with these four brothers somehow, that they were very distant relatives, and then it was like very juicy information that we got from the transcript. Hippler tried to underplay what happened here. He says, according to him in the order, it's a footnote. He says that Othram asked ISP if they would contact one of these four brothers to see if they could get, like, Audrey, you'll understand this, like if they could get direct DNA as opposed to this very, very distant type hit that they got picked up on the family tree. So what are they asking? They're asking him to maybe spit into a tube and send it in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, well, according to the transcript, tells another story entirely. According to the transcript, what had happened was, and this is under the Matthew Gemet part, he tells you, he says that Othram had contacted and said, could ISP call one of these brothers? So one of the officers made an initial phone call, and he wasn't sure if this was a joke, somebody playing a joke. So Matthew Gamet gets on the phone with the officer. The guy says, he declined, don't ever contact me again. So Hippler kind of kept that information. He just said, he decided not to be a part of it. It was like, no, I will not provide you with my DNA so that you can upload it for, law enforcement to use. And secondly, don't ever call me again,
What would that, okay, my question is, if they found these four DNAs that could potentially be four brothers, did they say that they were distant relatives of Koberger?
That's what you kind of get it's unclear as everything else
Unclear.
is, but that's what you kind of get the impression that this is like maybe like they share the same great grandparents. They said it was a very like a light type of a hit, Audrey. It was scant. It wasn't like if you spit into a tube, that type of DNA that you'll get. It was on the family tree, and they said that it was really far distant.
Yeah,
They said low,
like
hit.
three
Low hit.
It was like three what
Generation?
I don't know if it's generations, but it's kind of like that. It was like three of these far away, it was like this distant type of
I didn't understand. See, I have a trouble with understanding like what it is. How would that help them? How would getting these samples of these four brothers help the Idaho State Police to narrow down?
No, it was Othram who, because this was while Othram was still doing the testing.
Well,
They
how
had
would it
started
help
to build
Othram?
a family tree. They found these four brothers as possible distant relatives to the sheath DNA. And so they asked ISP, could you please contact one of them? And I don't know if it was like one
how would it
specific.
help Othram then?
Because then if the brother would then, Audrey, could you like if he would like spit into a tube?
So I'm thinking that one of the brothers had a slightly higher profile, and so then they would know that would be the next line you go down, because the brothers, they have slightly different DNA depending on the combination of genes they get from their parents, and maybe the combination of genes that this one brother had, they wanted that.
That's why they picked him then, because they said, they didn't contact all four. They just contacted the one. And like, again, at first when it was an officer from ISP who contacted, he thought it was a joke. He would, just whatever. And then when Gannett got on the phone with the officer, that's when he said, I'm not interested, and don't call me again. Don't bother me anymore with this. I'm not giving you my DNA.
Yeah, I like
to put into some law
Oh,
enforcement
sure, here's
database.
my DNA.
Well,
Mhm.
this is what's crazy when I'm not even gonna go through each of the statistics, but I'm gonna show you some of them. And this right here, it shows that only 48% of adults find it acceptable for DNA testing companies to share their users' genetic data with law enforcement. And I found that shocking that it would be that low. I would assume it would be a lot higher because they're not asking about going
Yes.
through back doors. Now, if they're going
Right.
through back doors, I'm sure it would be very low, 18%. But they're just talking about acceptable that DNA testing companies share their genetic data with law enforcement. I
Wow.
would think that would be 60% minimum to 80%, I would assume.
Well, maybe CJ, it might be they're not realizing what the concept. They just think, oh, we want help us solve some, some cold cases or remains. And so people, they're good-hearted. Oh, okay, whatever. Read what Leah Larkin has to say about that. She's what is she, a biologist? She said there was such a big to do in the biology, the community, like they would go to conferences and they were concerned about what this could potentially lead to.
Right. Because when you're looking at this case, and this is, a little bit more of what I want to drop on this right here. I was shocked when I first seen it because to me, I would assume most people would want law enforcement, if they're using it the correct way, to find the people that are committing these horrific acts, of course. But when you're looking at this case and you're looking at how it is being done, then I'm looking at that percentage and I'm going, yes, it makes a lot more sense. It makes a lot more sense that they're going to these conferences and people are concerned. I'm concerned too. I'm concerned enough to where in the beginning of 23, I changed how I went shopping for items at the store and I quit touching stuff.
There you go. Leah Larkin had said, she went out to a conference and she was going to, because what they did is they used it. She said it was the second time to find the Golden State unaliver. They found him through this type of technology. But the community said, hey, wait a second here. Do you understand what this is going to? So they couldn't even talk about it there. And then from there, they changed their protocols. That you had to a couple of these database, you cannot go in there, no way, no how. Others you can opt in to have law enforcement. But Leah Larkin, she was involved in the discovery process. She described there's an email from the feds. The to and from is blacked out that talks about some guy, initials S as in Sam, C, saying, oh, look, we got it. And they were like, they definitely went into she testified they went into databases they shouldn't have, at least 2 if not 3.
And the argument with that, and here's what the best way that I can justify what happened with the FBI violating a policy, because to me that's bad. That should not happen. I don't care what it is. But here the argument for the prosecution is they're saying, look, they violated a policy, but they didn't violate the law. They did it to catch an unaliver, okay? So it's the same as a nurse. If a nurse violates hospital policy to save a life, she may not get in trouble, okay, if the life was saved. So that's the argument that they're making. And that argument needs to be countered with something. And I just don't know what I'm thinking about, what kind of argument could counter that. But it doesn't matter because the judges didn't find that it was a violation.
He did not. No, he did not. He didn't find that it was a violation of anything. And I do not understand how they get to him I still don't get it. They're like, oh, well, the evening of the 19th, according to Detective Payne, we got this phone call, and it was like, you need to look at Brian Koberger the evening of the 19th, but just take this as a tip. Okay, well, how doesn't the going into these databases, they shouldn't have been, had something to do with them, because they said even before that he was not a person of interest, he wasn't in on our radar, all that nonsense, CJ, about the 2 WSU officers turning in his car November 29th. Nope, they not even mid-December. It wasn't until the evening, and it was the evening of the 19th when this call came in. And then 9 days later, Leah Larkin said, I don't understand it. There's no possible way you could get to someone that quickly using what they did. There's no way you can do it.
There's so
Not
much
9
work
days.
to it. There's so much work to it.
Yeah.
And the fact that they don't even have the work that they did, you have to have all of the homework. Audrey, you can speak to this. You have to have all of that homework just to be able to get to the conclusion.
Right, to show your work. What about this, CJ? What about this, CJ, and everybody else here? So they're saying Othram Labs, it was November 22nd is when they began working on this file. The 10th is when, what Payne said is we had a meeting. Who was there? I don't remember. Fry might have been there. This one, that one might have been there. Blah, 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 blah. And at that point, we as a group decided Othram should stop. That was about the time the phone call was made to one of these brothers to see if he would be interested in, donating his Redacted DNA. I still don't understand why they stopped Othram. They were working on that
weren't
file.
even
They're
done.
Accredited. Why do you stop them?
They weren't even done.
They were working.
The talk that's been out there is how Orthram couldn't get the hit, and that's why they took over. And I'm like, no, if you really look and read these documents, they tell you they got stopped. They weren't even done doing what they were doing. They just basically had to hand everything over. So that's the misconception is that Orthram wasn't able to get the hit and the FBI took over because Orthram extended all their possibilities. No, they were in the middle of doing what they were doing.
That's exactly what I felt.
And they came down and swiped it from them.
Well, that's where I wish that Taylor would have asked Payne that question. Why did you decide? This is who the contract was with. They're an accredited lab. You drove all the way 2,000 miles away, the two of you. I don't think it was Payne because I think that she would have asked if he would have been out to Othram and had any conversation. I think she would have asked him when he was on the stand. It was probably somebody else. But you took the time to drive out there 2,000 miles away, 2 people from Idaho, and then you stop. It seemed like they were in process of doing work. I would want to know, why did you stop Othram? Why? She didn't ask that question.
That's interesting.
Because the guy that was always in the press conferences and always in the meetings that should have never been, but was the one that controlled all the information, and that was President Green. And I guarantee you, President Green is the one that was telling. Yeah, Moscow was the lead detectives. We're the lead detectives. But I guarantee you, President Green was influencing the lead detectives.
Oh, speaking of which,
semester's starting soon. We need somebody. Come on.
Oh yeah. The detectives.
If we don't have people coming back, we don't have Moscow. Come on.
CJ, do you remember way back? I'm trying to think. It might have been the first, maybe it was the second big press conference that Fry had, when that one journalist was sort of like challenging him a little bit. She was a female, and she said something like, "Okay, so 2 people survived. There were 6 in the house. 4. So are they witness? No, they're not witnesses. Well, guess what? Then we see, she saw this. She said she's described in this transcript. The reason why the court redacted her name. She's a witness. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when he opened it up to questioning. That's a great memory because it was the second press conference that they had. And she was also the same one that asked, how can the public know that they're safe
Right.
if you don't even know where the person is or who the person is?
Oh, that's when Lanier came up. I think that's the first time he said, "Well, you're gonna have to trust us. Trust
Yeah.
us,
Right.
Roger Lanier." Right.
We
Then
have to keep
6
it
months
close to the vest.
Then 6 months later, he's gone. Right.
Okay, one last thing that I have before we start reading, but
Yeah, we
Uh,
need to get into it.
isn't it true that they found Brian Koberger's DNA in the trash mixed with another female DNA? Is that true? Is that what I read?
I
There
think
was a
I
minor and a major profile. They were able to deconvolute those, take them apart.
What does it mean by minor and major?
The amount of genetic information that would match a male or a female. Apparently, there was less of the female DNA than the male.
Audrey, one other question. What about this cigarette? The
Oh,
cigarette
yeah.
butt that was taken from the trash, right?
I'm not sure where the cigarette was from.
No, the cigarette was in the property. Around the
Right.
property.
Wait a second. You're right, Yoli. Wasn't there some discussion in there that someone saw someone and then dropping it and blah blah?
Yeah, the tire tracks
Wow.
that don't
Yeah.
even exist if somebody's leaving the scene of the crime. They don't even happen that way.
So are we just going to read from the beginning or any particular witness?
I was gonna ask. I'm cool for whatever you guys want to do. If you want to take turns, of who's talking, it doesn't matter to me. I just thought it would be interesting to kind of show everybody and read through it for those that haven't read it, or just want to have an audio version. I thought it would be something cool that we could all kind of talk about as we go through it and discuss some of the things that we found out as we were reading.
As reading it, okay.
Yeah,
Any
as we were reading the
particular witness we start with, you guys think?
We
of
start
anyone?
with the star. It's Detective Corporal Brett Payne. That's the first witness.
Star,
Page
star.
7. Page
All
7, line
right.
15. There he
Yep.
is.
It's
In all his glory.
you got the keys. Here's the link for the transcript if you want it. And then we're going to be skipping ahead and look at, I know it's 175 pages, but look at how big the letters are. It's like it's like a 5-year-old children's book, See Spot Run. Takes up half a page. All right, page 7 right here. All right, let me make sure I could probably zoom it in even more, actually.
Yeah, you can read CJ first. You want to read?
Yeah, let's do this.
CJ's dream. He gets to be Detective Brett Payne.
Oh, you want me to be Brett Payne?
He's
You don't want me to be Brett Payne.
Let's have why don't we ask the question and have CJ answer it?
Oh, that
Let's see.
sounds good.
You want me to be
Yoli,
Brett
why
Payne?
don't you go ahead
Okay.
and be Ann Taylor?
Okay, we'll do this. We'll do this for now. Yeah. Okay.
That's a smart way
Yeah.
to do it.
It's entertaining anyway, but
All right, hold on 1 second. Let me move. Hold on, let me readjust some things here real quick. Let me put this over
Could I
here.
be Brett Payne? I would love to be Brett Payne.
Yeah.
Yoli's going to examine me.
Yeah.
CJ, you want to sit back?
Yeah.
We'll give Brett Payne a female voice.
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
that's
good.
fine. That's
Good.
fine. All right.
Good.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so here, let me just zoom out one more time. There we go. All right.
Good
there we go.
morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
Will you state your full name, please?
Brett Payne,
How is your last name spelled?
Payne.
What do you do for a living?
I'm the detective corporal at Moscow PD currently.
How long have you been at Moscow Police Department?
Almost 7 years now.
Prior to Moscow Police Department, did you have law enforcement experience?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was that?
I was in the military police corps, the U.S. Army, for 3 years prior to coming to Moscow PD.
Are you post-certified?
Yes, ma'am.
In the course of your responsibilities with Moscow Police, were you handling an investigation involving homicides at 1122 King Road?
Yes, ma'am.
What was your role?
I was assigned lead detective after about the first 24 hours in that case.
And here's what I would have asked.
Okay. Good. What?
Who was the lead detective before you became the lead detective?
Ah, good question, Yoli.
Oh.
Good question.
Oh.
Okay. But anyway, let's go on. And does that mean that you have responsibility for the case and evidence?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, as such, did you participate in a search for a suspect?
Yes, ma'am.
And when was the first time you heard Brian Koberger's name?
The first time I heard Brian Koberger's name was December 19th, 2022.
And what was that a result of?
That was a result of investigative genetic genealogy that was being undertaken by the feds. We had a phone call that evening and we were told Brian Koberger's name. CJ, I want to interchange because I don't want your channel to kind of get targeted, okay? I'm going to call it feds every time you see that. Is that all right?
Oh, yeah.
yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yes, that would be great.
So,
Or three-letter agency, whichever you want.
Okay. Ms. Taylor, did you have a question for me?
yeah, so state again how it came about that you became aware of Brian Koberger's name.
That was a result of investigative genetic genealogy that was being undertaken by the feds. We had a phone call that evening and we were told Brian Koberger's name.
So your understanding is the feds were doing a genetic genealogy on a suspect.
Where are we?
No, I'm asking out of order. I'm asking my own question.
Okay, because I was looking for it.
Sorry.
Like, shit, where did I?
I don't remember. I'll throw that in.
Hold on.
Okay.
You gotta tell me that, Yoli, because I'm like, shit, where did
Okay, well, I won't go off. Okay, and and before that, I'm on this.
There we go.
And before that, Mr. Koberger was not on your radar.
No, ma'am.
Before December 19th, was the Fed's cast team member co-located with you?
Yes, ma'am.
How long had he been co-located with you?
I don't remember exactly, but it had been several weeks at that point.
And was that Nicholas Balance?
Yes, ma'am.
What other Fed team members were co-located with you?
Goodness, a lot. We had technical assistant Maria Tydell, S.A. Jacobson, and numerous other Fed special agents that were there to assist.
By the time it was December 19th and you first heard of Brian Koberger's name, had you reviewed videotapes?
Yes, ma'am.
How many hours of videotapes do you think you reviewed?
I don't remember. A lot. I can't give you an accurate representation.
That's so sad.
Yeah, right now, at this point, I would have
so
asked,
sad.
do you have any record of what videotapes you reviewed?
This is so sad.
I don't remember.
Okay.
I mean, that's his famous quote.
Right?
Wow. Okay. In those videotapes, did you focus in on any particular ones that were of interest to you?
Yes, ma'am. In particular would be are you talking about addresses that were, how would you like me to refer to them?
How you nicknamed the cameras?
So the first one was from 1112 King Road. It was a surveillance camera, an exterior surveillance camera on a house that was immediately to the northeast of 1122 King Road. There was some footage from a Linda Lane camera. I forgot the address off the top of my head. There was footage from the A&W, which is at the corner of Louder and South Main, or Highway 95.
And it was so good too. Shout out to them.
Yeah, you were there, CJ, right?
Yeah,
How
I went
far is
there.
that?
I went there a couple times. It was very good. It's not very far. You want to see how far it is?
Yeah, it was pretty close, huh?
So here's the camera. If you're not familiar, yeah, I actually drove through it on the camera just to show everybody the A&W. But this is the camera that they're referring to. Hold on one second.
What's pain with these big words? It's a ring camera. It's not a surveillance camera. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't want to say anything, but I guess I should.
Yeah. So that's the
It's like
camera.
a ring camera.
All right, that's
Surveillance
the camera. Yeah, everybody remembers. See this gas station right here? It's connected. You can see A&W sign, All American Food, right there. But I had already drove in. Then I was driving around. So watch. This is footage of how long it takes to get to 1122. So let me zoom this up. And let me change us back to circles while I show this real quick, and then we'll get back to that. So really not very much. Right now it's at the timestamp of 9:59, but they supposedly caught him on camera when his vehicle was right about here, because that's the only direction that camera could have picked up a vehicle because of the roof above the gas pumps, and then the brush that is right next to the corner there. There's only a slight section that they could have picked up the vehicle, and it only would have been from the windows up to the top of the roof. That's it, because the bushes would have covered most of the car. So they wouldn't have even gotten that great of a photo of the vehicle from there. You're only seeing the windows up. So right now we're at the timestamp 10:04, and I'll just let it play. And this is the route to the house.
This is awesome, CJ.
No, I know. It's great to have this visual.
It's not very far. You guys are going to be amazed. And look at how dark it is above my headlights. It's crazy dark there. At that time of the year, it gets dark shortly after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's already looking that dark by the time it's 5:15 in the afternoon. And when you're talking about 2, 3 in the morning, huge difference. So we had 10:04 as a timestamp. Right now we're at 11:13. We're going to see Sigma Chi House up to the right.
Banfield.
Just a couple turns from A&W. That's it. You're going by Linda Lane. Yep, you got the Banfield to the right. You can see the Sigma Chi House light to the right there on the house.
Like 2 minutes.
And
Yeah.
we're at 11:42 right now, so we're almost at 2 minutes. So it'll be roughly 2 minutes it'll take. And I'm taking it slow here too, because this is one of the first times I was there. I took a bunch of different footage, different times of the day.
Right.
But I was so nervous to drive down these roads because there is no room for 2 vehicles. I was constantly telling myself, like, in my mind, I'm like, every 5 seconds, okay, what do I do if a car comes too close here? What do I do if a car comes too close here? Because I didn't want to get into an accident, and the roads are so thin. You constantly had it. So, taking it easy, shortly over 2 minutes, and that's it.
Could you imagine getting into an accident, God, from Rosenthal's pulling up behind you, pulling out the ticket book? No, thank you. Good thing. Your common sense kicked in there, my friend.
Oh, I did. Everything was cool. Like, I didn't have any issues. I stayed away from them because I didn't want to. I did not want to interact with them because I already knew what the hell they were doing. But it was really cool because the college students from Washington State, the college students from the University of Idaho that I talked to, the community, the people that were working at your antique store, the people that were at Walmart, the whole community. I was asking a lot of questions and I learned a lot, and I was treated very well. In fact, I did a lot of my work when I would because of I was like staying about 2.5 hours away, maybe 3 hours away, because there was no lodging. It was during parents' weekend.
Wow.
And I didn't have any lodging, which there's not very much there. That's why I knew Moscow wouldn't be able to handle the court hearings and the trial, because I couldn't even get lodging when I went for my 1-year anniversary trip. And but when I got there, I was able to, because of how far it was for me to go back, I would document my footage while it was still light out to get light. Then I would document footage while it was dark. And then what I did is I sat in that parking spot behind the house, and that's where I did a lot of my work until, on the computer in the vehicle, until I was done. Because if I needed to do something, or if I forgot to take this footage, I was there. I could go do it. I didn't have to drive 3 hours back. So I always, every night, made sure that I finished up all my work before I left back. And these people would come to their cars and come home and leave, and nobody ever suspected me of anything, which it was appreciative, because I wasn't there to do anything wrong. But at the same time, it's kind of telling too, because you just had this crime take place the exact year. I'm there around the exact year. You don't know my vehicle. I've never been there before, and you don't know me. And I'm sitting there in this vehicle working on a computer with the screen lit up at my face, with me facing the back of the house. And nobody was even shocked about that. So I'd be sitting right here. This is one of the times that I got done doing my work, and I was heading back to go back to the hotel. And I was like, well, I'm going to take some footage of me, driving back to the hotel, on this night. And so I see how dark it is. And that's the craziest thing too, is when you're in that vantage point, and you'll see when my headlights come on, you'll see how close I am to the back of the house. You don't see the house, obviously, because there's no lights there. It's the dark spot to the right. But you can see the Sigma Chi house in this view. You literally at this spot. And you guys remember the picture of the red truck that you could see through Kaylee's sliding glass doors. That when you're parked right there, you have the whole view of the only access point to that whole neighborhood section right there, where Taylor and King intersect, right in front of the Sigma Chi house. But there's the bushes right behind the house. And then you could see as I end up leaving. And that's another thing right there. You got stairs right there. The house is right there. And nobody's leaving this scene at a high rate of speed, because I'm only going a few miles an hour. And I want you guys to see how close I am to this dumpster. I'm only a few miles an hour. And look at how close I am to the dumpster. When you're saying that there's tire tracks that are squealing right here in this spot, and they didn't get in an accident, that means that the tire tracks were going the other direction. They were going the other way, because then somebody's not going to get in an accident. But yeah, I'm glad that I was able to get that, because it does tell a story. It tells... it shows you, maybe you're not able to be there like I was, but that's why I try and be descriptive as possible when I'm explaining what I can show you to bring you closer, because it's a completely different atmosphere out there. Instead of like going off of what's said and how this went down, well, you mix that together with the experience of being there and being able to be like, I don't know if this does, and then you have the footage to kind of show it. It does tell a lot. So like with this footage, like with the A&W, we would have all thought, oh gosh, that had to be a good photo of the car. But no, I was there. I was able to take a look at the angle of the security camera that was on the restaurant. I was able to determine where exactly it would have gotten a small section of the car, and then able to determine what else was in front of it to be able to tell you guys, okay, no, yeah, maybe they got this A&W, but it's showing a couple windows and a roof. That's it. All right, where are we at? This question right here. There is no going fast. I only went a couple mile an hour, and you saw how close. And I have it in the daytime footage too. You can see it. Like, you get so close. You not only get close to that dumpster, you get close to that telephone pole. And if you're sliding off that road any little bit going around the corner, then you're going to fly into somebody's building. It's not happening.
Okay. CJ, we're at the bottom of 10. Should Detective Payne continue testifying here?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
thank you, sir. Okay, we're at line 22, everyone, page 10. Line 22, page 10. There was some footage from a Linda Lane camera. I forgot the address off the top of my head. There was footage from the A&W, which CJ loves, which is at the corner of Lander and South Main, going into the top of page 11, now line 1, or Highway 95. There was footage from an address on Indian Hills. There was also footage from a Ridge Road camera. And that's how we referred to them, was basically by those names.
With those references in mind and keeping December 19th in mind, which of those cameras were your focus before you learned of Brian Koberger's name?
I would say all of them were of importance before that.
And it was later that the other cameras became important, is that right?
Those were the main ones we relied on for vehicles. In particular is what those ones were.
I'm going to return to that in just a minute, but I want to talk to you about interviews. Did you interview people in relation to the case before December 19th?
Yes, ma'am.
And did other officers interview people?
Yes, ma'am.
Were some of those people the roommates of the people at 1122 King?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you review other officers' work as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have regular meetings with other officers about the status of the investigation?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have any role in deciding to pursue investigative genetic genealogy?
Yes, ma'am. It was a collaborative decision amongst the command team to go that route, but yes, I was a part of that.
Were you a part of the discussions during the process of the identification?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you aware that Othram Laboratories began the work on the investigative genetic genealogy?
Yes, ma'am.
What kinds of information did you receive from Othram Laboratories?
I don't remember what was received from Othram directly. I knew they were conducting their specific type of work. I don't remember exactly what they provided to us.
Did you receive some documents from them?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, do you know how many documents you received from them?
I do not.
Was it one time or more than one time?
I don't remember.
How do you not remember that?
Well, I don't remember, CJ.
Here's what I would.
I'm just saying, that simple. Was it once or more than once?
I don't remember. I don't remember.
How do you not remember if
I
it's
don't remember
an
how I
orange
don't
or an
remember.
apple?
Well,
Was it an orange or an apple? I don't know.
Well, here's the thing. How about, where are those documents that you received? What did you do with them?
Oh my God.
Where'd you put them?
What documents?
Right?
The documents.
You're talking about the affidavit of probable cause? Oh, that's document number 1 on the right under the Idaho versus Koberger case. I signed that.
That's
what that is. Is that the document you're referring to, Ms. Taylor?
Okay, let's go. Were you a part of the discussion to take the work from Othram and go to the FBI?
The who?
The Fed?
Yes, ma'am.
Why was that decision made?
From my understanding, granted, this is my first encounter with investigative genetic genealogy. So again, as a collaborative discussion, we decided that because the Idaho State Police Lab and Othram had essentially exhausted their resources, this is how I understood it, that we would move to the feds because they had more resources available to pursue this particular avenue.
Well, Okay. Do you know what more resources the FBI had?
The only thing I'm privy to was that they had more databases that they could compare the sample to. I bet they did. They had more databases that they could compare their sample to. That was the extent of my knowledge because I don't know.
Do you have familiarity with the databases and the rules that apply to those?
No, ma'am.
I'll save those questions. What was your communications with the feds about the IGG?
So our communications were just via telephone. The sample was sent to the feds. I don't remember the date it was given over to them. But after that, there were very few conversations. And if they happened at all, they were just telephonic, advising us the process was still in the works and they would let us know when or if they had anything of interest for us.
Do you know what files or documents went to the FBI from Courtroom?
I do not remember.
Oh my God. Did you receive documents from the feds in relation? Oh, wait. Did you receive documents from the feds?
Don't put words in my mouth, Miss Taylor. Yes, I don't. In relation to IGG,
Yes.
I believe after the fact, after we received Koberger's name, we did receive documents, but I don't remember what they were.
Do you know how many documents related to IGG you received from the FBI or the feds?
No, ma'am. I believe as part of discovery, it was in the thousands of pages, but that's the best of my knowledge.
Thank you for that. All right. So once you have Mr. Koberger identified, what's your understanding of what that meant to have his name?
Just in relation to the overall investigation, is that?
Yes.
So the only thing that was given to us was Brian Koberger's name. That was it. It was conveyed to us by the feds that it was to be taken as no more than a tip. That was it. So once we received his name, we set about doing basically an independent verification of whether or not he was involved in this crime.
Just the tip.
I'm going to talk to you about that a little bit more, but do you know why the feds connected Brian Koberger to the case?
So December 20th, if memory serves, we had a secondary meeting with the feds via Teams, if memory serves. And they simply walked us through the family tree, how they did that. Now, I don't remember the details of all that. It was an in-depth conversation that, to be honest, is above my head. But they essentially worked their way through. Judge Hippler, excuse me. You laughing at my testimony, sir. It's above my head. But they essentially worked their way through the family tree and arrived at a conclusion that Brian Koberger was a person we should look into as a tip. That's the extent of my knowledge of how they did that.
How was Brian Koberger the name you received as a tip linked to the case?
He wasn't until after December 19th.
What item of evidence did they link Koberger to?
I'm not sure what you're asking. As far as before December 19th, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
We didn't have one at that point.
Why did you become interested in learning the identity of Brian Koberger?
Not quite sure I understand your question. We were interested in anyone who would have been involved in this. The DNA from the sheath was obviously the one thing that we had that we thought was a very strong piece of evidence in this case. So it was that particular piece that we pursued as a potential avenue of identifying a suspect.
CJ's crying over there.
He's Judge Hippler.
I'm on mute.
Objection, Judge Hippler.
Okay. Scroll. Is it your understanding that the FBI's work said that it was Brian Koberger's DNA on the sheath?
That is not my understanding.
What's your understanding?
My understanding is that the feds concluded that Brian Koberger was a possible source of DNA that we should look into. They did not, to my knowledge, at any point say Brian Koberger's DNA is on the sheath. That was never conveyed to me, and I'm the lead detective on this case.
On December 20th, when that happened, when he's somebody you should look into, what did you do?
We had already started looking into him from the previous evening. So that day, December 20th, we began going through basically our sort of standard investigative procedures that we had been doing throughout the investigation for various leads, to include basic DMV searches, NCIC offline returns, NCIC searches. We have a database called TLO, which is a credit-based search we use to find basic information. So we started doing all those things, looking for information on Mr. Koberger.
And what you found is that he didn't have a criminal history, is that right?
Correct.
Talk to me about going to Pennsylvania for the trash pull.
Well, I was not in Pennsylvania for the trash pull. I don't know where you got that from, Miss Taylor.
I'll ask somebody else that later. All right. So after you received Brian Koberger's name, and he hasn't been on your radar at all before, is that right?
Correct.
All right. You had pursued interviews and surveillance video. Had you pursued evidence found inside the scene at 1122 King?
Yes, ma'am.
What efforts did you make to pursue unknown male B?
You have to be more specific. I don't remember exactly where unknown male B came from.
Do you have any notes?
Huh?
I mean, do you have body cam video of where? Oh my God.
Nunez?
I have the affidavit of probable cause again. I should remind you, Ms. Taylor. It's document number 1, page 1 of Koberger, Idaho versus Koberger. Yeah, I have that.
If I told you the lab report showed unknown male B came from a blood spot on the handrail going between the second and first floor, does that help jog your memory?
Yes, ma'am. Can I just interject something here that's just jumped out at me? Why would she say going from the second to the first floor? Why wouldn't you just basically say you come into the house, you walk up the steps?
Yeah, first to the
So-
second.
Right. So I'm wondering if this was closer to the top, kind of confirming what
Yes.
CJ's point was earlier, that this was closer to the top going from the second, like maybe the handprint was pointing downward. And that would sort
Yes.
of confirm what CJ was saying about when we all saw that infamous video looking in from the
Down.
outside of the technicians taking photographs right by those steps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yeah. I mean, does
You
that
s-
make sense?
I mean, when I first seen it, because that was all coming out right in the beginning, because everybody was going through their social medias, everybody was going through the local news video clips and all these different things. And yeah, that's the first thing that I thought of was like, holy hell, there's more stuff going down the stairs because they were taking photos going down the stairs. So
Right. So look, I mean, look at what he's saying here. It says you have to kind of get into the head of Brett Payne, to understand how he writes and he thinks. But it says here he's not saying going from the first to the second. And that's what you open the door. The bottom of the steps, the door is right there, right? So you open the door, you walk upstairs. He's saying, but this is from the second to the first. So it makes me kind of speculate, of course, that there was a handprint pointing downward, not pointing upward, just by how he's wording this.
he like this guy right here, Nunez, he had to look at his body cam to know that Murphy was there. So when he's showing up, I'm sure there's a whole bunch of people telling him, hey, look at this, look at this, look at this. Just like we were discussing earlier and have discussed since we found out when the January 5th, 2024, when Exhibit A dropped to the public. How do you see the knife sheath halfway under Maddie with Kaylee's legs over Maddie? How do you see it from the doorway? So any of this stuff it's got to be stuff that he's told, because he can't even remember if he's getting documents at one at a time or multiple times. If you can't even remember that, how do you remember key details of a crime scene?
I would, I would think as horrendous as this crime was, and the fact that, look, what are they working on? They're working on, running after kids on Banfield, noise complaints, maybe,
That's it.
parking tickets. You would think every aspect of this case would be seared into your mind forever.
Mm-hmm.
I have a really hard time with all of these I don't knows.
Yeah, it's implanted in your mind. I mean, you can
Right.
sit there. Anybody that's had to, hell, I was watching a documentary on the Secret Service agent that was protecting Jacqueline Kennedy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And he's sitting there. It's something that is so tragic that it etches in your mind and it takes you back like you were there, where you can feel and touch and smell and
Yeah.
experience it like it just happened. It's trauma. That's
Yeah.
why when people get triggered with trauma, it takes them back to that day like it just happened yesterday. How do you not remember key details
I don't
when it
know.
was something this tragic? I'll
And
never
you don't,
understand.
right, and like the last time you did an unaliving was 7 years before. I'm talking about him specifically because he wasn't even a police officer at that time. But it's
Right.
not like you're Chicago or you're Miami or one of these towns that have unalivings tragically every day. This is something that would be so unusual anywhere, but especially in this town.
So
Yeah.
why, my question is, I'm wondering why Ann Taylor didn't go stronger at him. Like,
That's a good question.
do you have any documents?
Yeah.
Are you prepared to testify today with notes and like, I don't know why, and I don't do criminal law, so I would think those would be the kinds of the things you want, and I hope that
Right.
at trial that she's going to do that.
Well,
Because-
maybe
this is the time to have done it because all of these witnesses, he's not a state witness. She subpoenaed him, so why not do a Dukas Tecum and say take your whole
Yeah.
file with you, or she
Right.
should have had it from before and showed him the stuff.
Well,
All
maybe
your-
what about this? What about this? Maybe if she went at it that route, maybe it would have delayed the trial even more. And that's the last thing that she wants, because she knows, listen, I already know this guy don't remember anything. So when it comes to trial, he'll get torn to shreds, because at that point, that's when I will dig in on it. And maybe she's afraid it'll extend the trial if she presses at this point, which she's going to be doing it in trial, because again, you go back to the OJ trial and you watch all the testifying that was taking place. These cops knew 3/4 of their shit. There was just a quarter that they didn't remember or didn't recall. It did not look like this. And you saw how they got torn to shreds with just the quarter that they didn't know. So maybe it's a way to make sure that the trial doesn't get delayed.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's just very unusual, because then I would say, do you
It
really
is.
want him to testify for the first time in front of the jury where you don't know what he's going to say?
It is,
But I don't know.
But
Well, you
think about how powerful. Think about it. What if it's I'm going to spend a whole another day talking to Brett Payne just to get the same runaround that I'm getting. Let's save that. Let's not delay it. I know that when it comes to trial, that's not going to look very good to a jury when a lead investigator doesn't even remember. They're going to be like, this guy's not. It doesn't matter if the judge thinks he's credible. It's about the jury. And if the jury's going to sit there and go, how is this guy credible when he can't even remember simple stuff, the stuff that we're asking each other right now? Because when it comes to this jury, they're going to be in that room talking to each other like we're talking to each other right now. How does this make sense, Yoli? How does this make sense, Audrey? How does this make sense, Kathy?
So the only thing that I can say is for the Franks hearing, it didn't rise to the level of what it should have risen to. But the point,
it's impossible to get a Franks. I mean, just basically, from what I understand, is that if there's one bit of, they can make 5 false statements knowingly and that would be dealt with in another issue. But if there's one standing alone that by itself The judge could find probable cause. That's it. You're done. You know, you're not going to get it. And that's why they're hard. Like, people have asked me, do you have any statistics on how many are granted? I'm like, I don't. You know, and even some of my followers have looked. They said, we can't find anything. What's that tell you? Every case I've researched out of Idaho or wherever, Frank's denied. I mean, that legal standard's impossible.
Well, it's preserved for appeal if she wants to appeal it. So,
well, she said
nobody likes to make new changes either. Judges don't like to change what's already previously done, and if it comes to something that they don't know how to do, they're gonna. I mean, they're afraid. That's why they have the Supreme Court, because they're like, let them figure it out. I don't want to be the first person to go about it a different way when it's never been set before me already.
Yeah, I agree, CJ. I mean, unless this is so cut and clear, he's not going to want to take this case away from the jury, you know.
No.
So here's where I get confused in the testimony. So I'll ask, why did you not pursue that person?
Well, at that point in time, we had already received Mr. Koberger's name. And from my understanding was entering another DNA profile into CODIS would remove the previous one that we had from the knife sheath. So if memory serves, the discussion was, we'll hold off till the 12th of never. We'll hold off. We'll stay with the one from the sheath. If we need to, we can address the unknown male B at a later time.
That is BS. That is BS.
How does it replace it?
That is not justice for the victim.
I don't understand how Hippler didn't look at this, 10 times cross-eyed and say, well, okay, even if, let's just say, assuming arguendo, Mr. Koberger is the perpetrator, maybe he had an accomplice.
You'd want everybody,
or maybe he's innocent, or this is I don't get this.
Well, he's just judging. He's not going to tell the prosecution, you need to go investigate these other people. So he's just not going to do that.
Yeah, just because, they found this type. It sounds like a print heading. I would bet my house on it. Print heading downward, because that's how it's said here. It's from 2 going to 1, not going to 2. That's the direction that somebody would leave after committing these atrocities on the 2nd floor. You'd run down those steps to get out as quickly as you can. We're not going to look into that. We're not going to send that DNA to Courtroom and tell you do as much of it. And this is BLOOD. This isn't something on the inside of a sheath that's been sitting there for 8 hours. This is BLOOD.
And
this right here, CJ, makes no sense.
Yeah, this makes no sense. And I don't understand why they can't enter another profile into CODIS. How does that replace?
How it doesn't qualify, How does it not qualify?
How's it not qualify?
Well, here he's not saying it doesn't qualify. He's just saying, well,
no, they said it before. They said it before in the beginning. Said it. Yeah, Bill Thompson.
But here we have the real reason, and that's because he believes it would override what was in CODIS already, which I have no understanding.
That makes I don't.
It's a separate profile.
It wouldn't have, right?
It
was a separate profile, right?
He's mistaken about how that works right here, or he knows.
Well, yeah, but then the other thing is, I think right here, Yoli, reasonable doubt.
Yeah, it's reasonable doubt, I think. Okay, so I want to make sure I understand your testimony. Were you not aware of unknown male B until after December 19th when you knew Brian Koberger's name?
No, ma'am. I was aware of that before, yes.
How about unknown male D?
Again, you're going to have to be more specific, Miss Taylor.
If I told you unknown male D came from a lab report from a sample of blood on some gloves outside the house, does that refresh your memory?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
You're aware of that too?
Yes, ma'am.
I want to back up and talk about the affidavits. I think you told me in a prior hearing that you were the person who wrote Exhibit A, or the affidavit in support of the search warrants when it came to looking for things about Brian Koberger. Did I understand that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And that affidavit, when you began, Was that on or about December 23rd to get records?
As far as when I started writing the affidavit, is that what you're referring to?
The first search warrant that applied to Brian Koberger.
I believe it was December 23rd. Yes.
When did you begin writing that affidavit?
I began writing that affidavit long before that. It had been a running affidavit because at the beginning of it, there's the walkthrough of the crime scene. There's numerous things. It was a living document. So we just add information to it. I'd say the document started, oh, I don't know, couldn't give an exact date, a couple weeks prior to that, even before we knew Mr. Koberger's name.
Help me understand what parts were added after you knew Mr. Koberger's name.
Well, to walk down the line best I can. So obviously there's this initial component, which is the crime scene, the testimony from the roommates. And after that, it shifts to, I believe, the first mention of, or the first component that Brian Koberger was pulled over by Corporal Duke on a traffic stop. He was also contacted by WSU police. His vehicle was run by WSU PD officers. Then after that, we included trying to walk down through the thing without it in front of me, that we included the vehicle information that was about the white Elantra. And after that, we included his residence and that he had hit LPRs, or his vehicle had been seen in LPRs between Moscow or Pullman, and Pennsylvania. And then there was the component about where he lived in Pennsylvania.
Let's go back to the time before you started adding the traffic stop. The affidavit contains some information that you gained from other officers. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you didn't write large parts of that affidavit. Is that also right?
I took a lot of language from experts and other officers and agents. Yeah, that's correct.
Are you aware your affidavit, your living document, was claimed by other people as their own original document, not giving you credit, but claimed as their own? Are you aware of that?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you aware that you probably know because Nicholas Balance was co-located with you? Did the two of you continually work on language to satisfy what the prosecutor wanted to see for probable cause?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you and Nicholas Balance produce a map to show a possible route of travel for your suspect?
Yes, ma'am. And that's that beautiful map that's located in
that black-
page 9 of the affidavit of probable cause that looks like Mars. Yes,
It's
ma'am,
black.
that's my work.
I couldn't use it. I gave up. I gave up trying to figure it out because it already
Tell
took
me.
long enough to map out the exact PCA route, and then on the way leaving, I tried to map that out too, and it got to a point where I was like, "Look, I've already spent most of the day trying to come up with this. I'm losing daylight. I gotta go."
He's so proud of that map.
It made no sense.
He included it in his affidavit of probable cause in Pennsylvania. Like there's a
It made
second
no
affidavit which has more information. That map's in that as well, CJ. It's a work of art. Sorry,
Made
I
no
don't like it.
sense. No.
He made
It was
it
very
hard.
frustrating for me. It was frustrating for me, and I'm like, it just doesn't make any damn sense. It don't.
Okay. And Your Honor, I'm at Defendants 1A. And here we go with that's the map, we know. I can either put it up here or approach the court with the map. CJ,
All right.
you report.
Can I see what you're referring to? There's been a lot of exhibit, as in this case.
A's, Exhibit A's.
Exhibit A's in this case, just as housekeeping, you had mentioned you stipulated to the admission of sounds like a large chunk of records, 1,000 pages.
Yes, Your Honor. It's the stack of exhibits that came behind the amended Frank's motion from the defense.
Okay, do you want me to search through that to find the stuff you want me to rely on?
I don't. I'm happy to give you my copy.
No, I don't mean that. As you know, I entered an order in this case that I'm not going to scour the record to find things that support your claims in this case. You have to cite them in particularity. Yeah. As so I get concerned when I'm told I'm going to get a large document to be admitted that doesn't sound like it's going to be the focus of the actual hearing or much of it.
Well, Your Honor, I do have quite a few more questions for this detective. I'm trying to be mindful of my role here with him as far as Frank's and his work with an IGG. But when it's time for me to argue Franks, what I plan to do was argue from the exhibits, identify them for the court, and hand the court my copies. So I don't expect the court to thumb through all the D1s and D2s. I just didn't bring another 1,000 pages with me.
I understand. My concern wasn't so much what I had in front of me as actual paper. My concern is littering the record with things that are not referred to. If you're going to refer to specific documents in there, that's fine. But don't expect me to go looking at things you don't refer to necessarily.
Oh, I absolutely understand that, Your Honor. Those were all put in so that counsel would be advised.
The fact that I admit this group of documents does not mean that it is something that can be relied on, absent you actually using it.
Absolutely, I understand that, Your Honor. I don't expect the court to read my mind. Thank you for that. Detective, I'm going to put this map here. Is that the map that you and Nicholas Balance came up with to help probable cause?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm going to leave that there for just a minute, and I'm going to ask you some other questions. I want to back up to the part of the first affidavit. This is asking for AT&T records. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And this AT&T record, is that the first set 48 hours of AT&T records?
Yes, ma'am. I believe so. That would be for the 8458 phone, sometimes called the 8548 phone in the affidavit. Sorry about that.
Inconsistencies.
Oh, they're just typos. And
Yeah.
Are these AT&T records related to a phone Mr. Koberger had?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And so in doing this affidavit, you have this working document, and I'm going to start with DM. If I say DM, do you know who I'm talking about?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
And she is one of the roommates. Is that right?
We're sealed. You can use the name.
I can use the name. Trying to get a habit. Who is she?
She was one of the surviving roommates.
And how many times was so-and-so interviewed by law enforcement at the time you wrote this December 23rd report?
If memory serves, it was 4, I think. 3 or 4.
In the affidavit, you wrote a statement that she heard Kaylee go upstairs, yell, "Someone's here," and run back downstairs. Is that correct?
I don't remember this from the affidavit of probable cause. Does anyone else?
I don't.
You know,
Nope.
this was not in the affidavit of probable cause. I'm sorry, Ms. Taylor. Could you repeat that question?
Yeah, let's go back.
Yeah, that wasn't in it.
Okay, in the affidavit, you wrote a statement that she had heard Kaylee go upstairs, yell, "Someone's here," and run back downstairs. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you used the words she thought she heard. Do you remember that?
Here comes Ashley Jennings ruining everything.
Audrey.
Audrey, yeah.
You're Ashley Jennings.
Oh, Your Honor, I'm going to object. I'm objecting based on the scope of what this testimony is supposed to be. My understanding was it was limited solely to the issue of Franks and IGG.
You sound just like her.
I
was just about to ask that question. I don't recall the statements of Redacted being a subject of a motion to suppress separate from the Franks issue. Am I correct about that?
That is correct, Your Honor.
Okay, so we're not at a Franks hearing on that issue. The only issue we are at a Franks hearing on this is the IGG.
All right, well, let me rephrase. Let me start from a different place.
I'll sustain the objection.
Where are we? What line? I'm sorry. Just very upset with the Ashley Taylor, the party trooper coming in here. Because I was getting ready to spill the beans.
Line 22 of page 26.
Oh, what am I doing down at page 28? I'll take it down. 26?
Yeah, hold on, let me go back. I think it was 22. Yeah, line 22 of page 26.
Let's go to the part of your affidavit for December 23rd, AT&T 1, the part where you put in things particular to Brian Koberger. You put in that affidavit a traffic stop, I believe, from August in Moscow, Idaho. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
That traffic stop, was that on your radar before December 19th when you learned of Brian Koberger's name?
No, ma'am.
The next thing you relied on was a traffic stop at WSU. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Was that traffic stop on your radar before you knew of Brian Koberger's name on December 19th?
No, ma'am.
You put in information about front license plates being missing from Pennsylvania cars. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
The 1112 video did not show enough of the vehicle that you could see whether it had a front license plate. Is that right?
That sounds correct. Yes.
So it was after you learned of Brian Koberger's name that became a part of your affidavit. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Let's talk about the vehicle identification for a minute before I run back down through the rest of the affidavit after Brian was identified. When you worked with Special Agent Imel to identify a vehicle, was there more than one vehicle he identified?
I don't believe there was. If memory serves, it was just the Hyundai Elantra.
Would you agree that he was most comfortable with years 2011 to 13?
Object, Your Honor.
Yeah.
For the
Yeah,
same
that's a-
reason, I don't understand the scope related to IGG.
Your Honor, I'm going to ask for a little leeway on this one. I think it will be clear in about 2 more questions. It's a sealed proceeding. I'll be arguing it at Frank's.
I don't want to pollute the record, so approach. That's an interesting. I got to pause there for a second. That's an interesting response. I don't want to pollute the record, so approach. What? Pollute the record?
Because he's getting ready to say it changed from a 2011 to a 2013.
Yeah.
To a 2011 to a 2016 after the 19th of December.
After Brian Koberger.
I betcha anything.
But in their statement on December 29th, 2022, the day before Brian Koberger was arrested, they still stated they were looking for a 2011 to 2013, and they also stated that they did not have a suspect.
Unbelievable. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can show you guys real quick if you want to see it. Hold on 1 second.
I have to get some water. Detective Payne needs to go get some water. I'll be right back.
Yeah, I need to get a refill of my water.
Yeah,
too.
go ahead.
I'll be right back.
I'll show this real quick. This is the press release. Let me see here. So here's the press release, and I'll bring up the link so you can see. Actually, you know what? Let me just pull it up. Let me see. Press release. I'll drop the link for you. You can have it for yourself. Let's see. Where is that? Right here. Okay, so let me stop that. And let me just share this instead, and then I'll just share the link with you. So here's the link. You can have it for yourself. It still exists. So there's the link, and it says right here. Let me get rid of this. So December 29th, 2022, the day before they arrested Koberger.
Right.
It says right here.
Right. Remember that?
Right here.
Yeah.
Progress continues to locate the white 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra.
Wow.
That totally contradicts everything that they're saying.
Day before his arrest, right?
The day before. So
unbelievable.
This is what I was telling people. I think that this was put out early in the morning because it doesn't have a timestamp for it. I think this was put out early in the morning, and by that afternoon, it had already moved to Koberger. Because you don't put out this press release that morning, and you already have the cleaning crew scheduled if you know that you're going to be arresting the suspect the next day. You cancel that in advance, and you don't put the statement out there.
I'm wondering if they will say that it's because they didn't want to. Well, I know it's bullshit, but what if they say we didn't want to tip off Brian Koberger? That's why we put it out. But that means they're lying to the public.
How are they not like? What are they? Because he's all the way in Pennsylvania, and so because they switched the year. I mean, you see how many white cars are
Yeah.
there, and how many Hyundais? They were talking 22,000 in the very beginning. They were gloating about. Lanier was gloating about the 22,000 vehicles that they had to start from and then whittle it down.
It doesn't make sense.
It don't. It don't at all.
He got so tired of doing that, he had to retire 6 months later. That's what caused it.
Hey. Oh, those old shows.
Okay. They looked
ahead.
for 2011 to 13. It was their Bolo. It was after Brian was identified by IGG, they expanded their search.
Right.
That relates to what?
It's going to relate to Frank's, but it has to do with the IGG and when they identified him. I have about 2 more questions along this line.
You have the separate Frank's motion regarding the scope of the car search.
Absolutely.
That we're not here for today. We're here for the IGG. I get the idea that if the IGG is suppressed, the warrants based on IGG is suppressed, that affects a lot of other things, right? But I don't think you need to get into the evidence of that at this point because it's part of the Frank. Okay. There's a separate Frank's motion on that.
There absolutely is. The next question I'm going to get to in the affidavit after the IGG was the police and Pullman running the car. And he has laid it out in the affidavit after the IGG without stating it. So I'm doing the IGG part with him now. That car is a different year than the one the Bolo is for. That's as far as I'm going with the car at this hearing.
Counsel?
I don't understand what that has to do with the IGG. It's part of the Frank's hearing related to vehicle identification. I understand her timeline, but I don't think that point has already been made.
This was when I was allowed to explore this witness since he's already been here and we paid for him to come here.
Yeah, but I didn't open up everything to Frank's because we couldn't get into all of the other things that I understood we could get into the entirety of Frank's on IGG, which is why I allowed it. And that's what we're going to stick to today.
See, I don't understand that, but in any event, IGG flows. It makes everything.
Well, I'm not suggesting we get into the other Frank's issue that sprung in part from IGG because those are separate based, right?
Stupid.
And so I think we need to just talk about the specific IGG stuff today in terms of Frank's. There's not a separate motion to suppress based solely on that, and not the IGG, if I'm not mistaken, apart from Frank's motions.
To suppress which? I'm not following. I'm sorry. I'm not following.
There are motions to suppress that are not Frank's related.
Right. I'm not going there.
That's evidence we can put on today, but I thought we were going to do that later today.
Absolutely.
There are various Frank's motions, one of which is to suppress. One of the Frank's motions is that there was a Frank's violation by not informing the magistrate of the use of IGG in violations as you allege them in obtaining the IGG. That's the issue we are doing today in terms of evidence, and I want to stick to that. So getting into the car, which is separate, which I understand your argument is the IGG led them to expand the search of the cars, but that's not the Frank's issue itself. The Frank's issue on IGG is the IGG itself, and it's limited to that.
All right.
I'm going to sustain the objection.
All the things in the warrant that became particular to Brian Koberger were not on your radar before you learned his identity through IGG. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you elected not to put the IGG identification in your probable cause affidavit. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
What led to that decision?
What led to that decision? Okay. That decision was a collaborative decision. We made that decision in an effort to independently verify the information that was provided to us as a tip from the FBI in much the same way that we would any other tip in law enforcement. So it was not in any way meant to obfuscate any sort of information. It was simply, can we validate Mr. Koberger's involvement in this incident, or can we not? That was it.
As a group effort, you decided to intentionally leave that out of your affidavit.
Yes, ma'am.
Given the limitations at this point, I think that's all my questions.
All right. And then cross-examination.
Good morning, Detective. I only have one question for you. Let's go back to December 19th, December 20th, and the information that was provided to the team, correct? It was a team?
Yes, ma'am.
And who all was a part of this team that was receiving this information telephonically from the feds?
Oh, okay. Well, so there were several of us. Yourself, Mr. Thompson was there, Darren Gilbertson from the ISP, Ed Jacobson from the feds. I believe there were a couple other folks from the feds and ISP in the room. I don't remember exactly who they were. And then myself. There were numerous people that were involved.
Would it have been essentially the team leaders for the investigation?
Yes.
Was this any different than any other information sharing that occurred during this case?
Not at all.
There were routine team discussions?
Yes, ma'am. We had 2 official briefings every day of the investigations, morning and evening. So twice a day, we would all link up. And this was not just the command team. This was everyone who was not actively on an interview would come back to the police department.
Wow.
Sit in the same, hey, this is a serious operation over here. I don't know what you're talking about, Judge. Come in on the interview, would come back to the police department, sit in the same room, and discuss the information that was learned from that day. So it was very common throughout this investigation for us to all be in the same room discussing the same information.
So you were not only the only investigator receiving information from various sources?
Absolutely not.
So can we talk about this Exhibit A? That wasn't necessarily just your Exhibit A.
No, ma'am, it was not.
It was all the information that the investigators had up to that point.
Yes, ma'am. That is an accurate statement.
Now, related to the IGG, the information you were provided by the FBI, and that information provided, did you receive any medical information about Brian Koberger?
No, ma'am, we did not.
I don't have anything further. Thank you.
Okay, goodbye.
Redirect.
Oh, no.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
Oh, no.
Sharing information with people that weren't even part of the. That's wild. That's wild. Go ahead.
Ms.
I'm
Jennings was just talking to you about the team, I guess, that got together a couple of times a day from November 13th until December 19th or 20th. Is that our target time right now?
Yes, ma'am.
And was Mr. Green in that team? No, I'm just kidding.
Yes, he was.
Who from the feds was part of those daily meetings?
Like I said, S.A. Jacobson was there. Maria Tydell was there. I believe Special Agent Rob Hille was involved. I'm trying to think of the other names. Nope, I don't remember any. There were others there. I just don't remember who they were. I apologize.
It's okay. How about who else from Moscow Police Department?
Oh, okay. Well, Captain Blacker was there. I believe usually Detective Vargas was there. Sometimes even Chief Fry would sit in on those meetings. Most nights, Chief Fry would sit in on those meetings. Captain Dallinger, now Chief Dallinger, as predicted by one CJ. Yes, he was there as well. Anthony Dallinger was in those meetings from MPD. I'm trying to think of all the others. Basically, the whole command team from MPD was itself there, be in those meetings, and whoever else happened to be available from the investigative section would also come in.
Who from ISP was there?
Darren Gilbertson was there. I believe Detective Joe Lake was there most days. I can't remember who else was consistently there. I remember those two for sure. Lieutenant Mike Mooney was in those meetings. That was the three off the top of my head.
When was the first time you talked about the identification of Brian Koberger in those meetings?
And as far as when we knew of him,
Yeah.
December 19th.
How many hours of meetings do you think you had up until the identification of Brian Koberger?
Oh, goodness gracious, many. I don't know. It was a lot.
Twice a day? Every day?
Yes, ma'am.
7 days a week?
If not more than that, yeah.
So how can you do more than 7 days a week?
Well, you have to understand, we're operating in Detective Payne's world. You can work more than 7 days a week.
Yes. And thank you, Detective. You can step down.
Oh, thank God. Now I go talk to my friend Mallory over here.
Oh, boy. All right. Defense can call its next witness.
I'm sorry?
You can call your next witness.
Riley Nolan.
And I'll be the clerk, too. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give now before the court is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Who wants to play Miss Nolan?
I'll do it. I do.
Okay. Let me see here. Renee Nowlin have been duly sworn, testified as follows.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Will you please state your name for the record?
Rylene, Rylene, Nolan, Nowlin.
I think you've done this before.
A few times.
How are you employed?
I'm employed as a forensic laboratory manager with the Idaho State Police Forensic Services Laboratory in Meridian, Idaho.
How long have you worked for Idaho State Police Forensics Laboratory?
I've worked for Idaho State Police Forensics Services since November 2002.
Did you have prior experience similar?
Prior to my employment with ISP, I did not.
How were you trained for your job?
I have formal education. I was originally hired as a forensic scientist in the biology DNA unit. As such, I was required to have a degree in biology, biochemistry, or similar. I was required to have coursework in genetics, molecular biology, biochemistry, and statistics. And then I completed the Idaho State Police Forensic Services Specialized Training Program in Biology Screening, as well as in DNA analysis, as well as in DNA database analysis. And then I've completed hundreds of hours of continuing education over my years.
Are you a member of any professional organizations?
Yes, ma'am.
Which ones?
I'm a member of the Northwest Association for Forensic Scientists, the American Association of Forensic Sciences, and the American Society of Crime Laboratory Directors.
Are you a part of a collaborative?
Yes, I am a member of the National Technology and Validation Implementation Collaborative.
What is that one about?
This is a group comprised of laboratory management. Typically, it depends on which portion or subsection of the collaborative that have gathered together to generate ideas for best practices and guidelines for new technologies coming into forensics.
Would investigative genetic genealogy be a new technology coming into forensics?
This is one of the technologies. However, our group refers to it as FIGG, Forensic Investigative Genetic Genealogy.
Ooh. Okay, FIGG. Okay, I'll try to remember that. That's the one I want to talk about today. So your group is talking about best practices for FIGG, is that right?
That's one of our areas of focus, correct?
Are you doing that because there are practices that are important in that discipline?
We are doing that because it's a new technology coming into the forensics world, and not everyday laboratory manager has a background in DNA. We also have a group on firearms because not every laboratory manager has a background on firearms and looking to implement new technologies.
Wow.
You mentioned best practices. Does that have anything to do with things that I might refer to as standards or procedures or protocols?
No.
What does best practices mean?
Best practice is a recommendation based on the current knowledge in the field. There are organizations that come up with standards for different fields, but this group, that is not their purpose.
In your lab, do you have standards and procedures and protocols?
Our laboratory does have. We call them analytical methods, as well as our quality system.
Analytical methods and quality systems means the same thing as procedures and protocols.
Yes.
What does that mean to you?
What that means to me, our laboratory is accredited laboratory, so we have a set of accreditation standards that we must meet. In order to do that, we have set quality policies as well as the analytical methods for each discipline. That ensures that we are consistently performing our scientific analyses in a way that has been validated and shown to be proper for the testing that's being conducted, and it also shows that we are meeting the national standards by which we are accredited. In addition, DNA has additional standards that they must meet called the FBI's Quality Assurance Standards for Forensic Casework Laboratories, as well as Forensic Databasing Laboratories.
I want to start with the first part of it. You mentioned, I think, that there are standards and protocols. My definition of them, that helps assure your work so that somebody can look and see what you did and maybe get the same result or understand what you did. Do I understand that right?
Yes, it's methods we follow, and yes, that would be one application. Someone could look and see what we did.
Now, you mentioned at the very end of what you told me before, DNA has something separate.
Correct.
What do you mean?
Because our laboratory is a participant in the National DNA Index System, it's commonly referred to as CODIS, which stands for Combined DNA Index System. We are subject to additional standards set forth by the FBI because they manage that database.
What are those standards?
Those standards are as the QAS standards. They cover everything from when I listed the classes I had at the beginning. They decide what classes a DNA analyst coming in should have, what education a DNA technical leader should have, what things need to be included in a validation study, how facilities need to be controlled. It covers a gamut of testing.
Validation study, what does that mean?
Whenever new chemistry, a new instrument, a new procedure is coming online in the laboratory, we perform a study to ensure that a chemistry instrument or procedure is working or receiving the expected results.
Okay, and to be sure, you have to do that because you use CODIS.
Our DNA section has to do with that because we use CODIS. The rest of the laboratory because of the part of our accreditation standards.
Tell me what CODIS is briefly.
CODIS, Combined DNA Index System, is essentially a national database. It exists on 3 levels. There is a local level, your county sheriff's office, local PDs. There's a state level, which is typically the state laboratory. It is limited to public laboratories, and then the national level. In Idaho, the Idaho State Police Forensics Lab in Meridian is the only DNA lab in the state. So there are no local labs in the state of Idaho, and the database contains different indexes. There's a forensic index. Those are profiles obtained from items of evidence. There's an offender index. Those are samples from those convicted of the qualifying offenses in your state as determined by your state legislature. If your state legislature allows arrestees, there's an arrestee index. There's also a missing persons index and for remains.
Do you have any special role with the CODIS database?
Currently, I'm a CODIS user. That is my only role at the moment.
What was your role in the fall of November of 2022?
CODIS user.
Do you have any administrative responsibilities with CODIS?
Not currently.
Have you had in the past?
In the past, I have served as the alternate state administrator for Idaho.
For CODIS, DNA that goes into CODIS, what kind of profile is used?
If I'm understanding the question correctly, there's different types of DNA profiles, and what goes into CODIS is known as an STR profile or short tandem repeat.
What kind of information is in a short tandem repeat or STR?
Can I give a brief explanation about DNA?
Sure.
So DNA is a substance that's found in the cells of our body. It acts as a blueprint, and it tells our bodies what form to take and how to function. Between individuals, it is over 99% the same. That is why we all have the same basic structure, and our bodies function basically the same way. In forensics and in STRs, we are targeting that less. We're targeting that less than 1% that is unique to an individual, with the expectation of identical twins, and so areas of DNA that vary widely between individuals don't code for anything typically. So it doesn't tell us anything about a person. When I look at an STR profile, I can tell you if that person is genetically male or genetically female, and that is all.
Do you know what a SMP profile is?
I do.
What is it?
A SMP profile is a single nucleotide polymorphism. So you're looking at a single nucleotide, whereas the STR is a series of repeating nucleotides, a specific repeat that we're looking for.
The SMP then, is that a closer look at a person's genome?
I would like to state that I'm not an expert in SMPs. I'm not qualified in the SMP technology and have not ever been qualified in the SMP technology. With STRs, depending on the chemistry, you're looking at anywhere from 13 to 25 plus locations. With SMPs, my understanding is general, you're looking at a minimum of 10,000.
Does that mean there's more information about a human contained in an SMP than there is an STR profile?
Your Honor, I'm going to object at this point. This witness is not disclosed as an expert, and she just testified she's not an expert in S&P technology. And then the court says, I appreciate that with respect to her answer, and I will take that into account in the event the defense intends to rely on that testimony. I took it as a sort of background about her general knowledge. I'll allow it for now. I'm not taking it as expert testimony about the S&P beyond the basic understanding of what S&P is.
Thank you. Do you remember my question?
Yes. I would assume if you're looking at a larger part of the human genome, that would be getting a larger amount of information about someone.
I have one more question about CODIS, and then I want to move to a different area. You mentioned that there's 4 indices, and you talked about a forensic index.
Correct.
What is that one used for?
The forensic index is where profiles generated from items of evidence can be uploaded. There are rules about what can be uploaded, though it cannot match someone known to be the victim of a crime. It cannot match someone whose DNA should be in a place outside of a crime being committed. It cannot be anything taken directly from a suspect of a crime where you would reasonably assume their DNA would be present. It must be related to a crime, and it must be believed to be from the punitive perpetrator of that crime.
So if I understand it, you use DNA, get an STR, and only under certain circumstances you use CODIS. Do I understand that right?
Correct.
Okay, outside of CODIS, and I understand what that does, if you create a profile, a DNA profile of somebody, is that a separate thing you do in your lab, even if you're not going to run them through CODIS?
Yes. When we receive items of evidence or samples from known individuals, we generate a DNA profile from those.
Did you become involved in the homicide in Moscow from 2022?
Involved as the manager of the laboratory of Meridian, I haven't actually done any work on evidence in the case or issued any reports.
All right. Is it fair to say that you did not go to that residence then?
Correct.
As a lab manager, do you understand about what evidence has come into the lab from that case?
There was a lot of evidence submitted. I have general knowledge of items that have come in, but I could not provide you a detailed list off the top of my head.
That's okay. I won't ask you to. Thank you. As a lab manager, are you aware of different bits of testing that were done related to this case?
In general, yes.
Are you aware of a profile called Unknown Male A?
Yes.
Where did that come from?
To my recollection, Unknown Male A came from a swab taken from a nice sheath that was submitted by Moscow Police Department.
Are you aware of Unknown Male B?
I believe that was another sample from hearing the previous testimony that was from in the house.
I would only want you to testify from your own base of knowledge.
From my own memory, I don't recall exactly where B was from.
Fair enough. Thank you for clarifying that for me. Are you aware that investigative genetic genealogy or forensic investigative genetic genealogy was used in this case?
Yes.
What was your role in that?
My role specific to this case was facilitating the signing of a memorandum of understanding, making sure all parties received it and had signed it. Those parties being the police agency, the prosecuting attorney's office, as well as a member of ISP's management team. And then when the preliminary report was received, my job was to look over it, ensure that it had all the required pieces in the report, and then to authorize payment of the invoice for that testing.
What role did you have with the laboratory that was going to perform the FIGG work?
As far as we came to be in contract with them, so when ISP decided to pursue a contract with the laboratory that could perform the SMP testing that we talked about earlier, we're a state agency, so we don't just get to call up anybody and hire them. So we had to go through a bid process. So part of my role was developing the scope of the work for the invitation to bid and in what we expect the vendor to perform. And then when the bids came in, I was involved in the team that evaluated the documents that were submitted. And then ultimately the division of purchasing determined who won the bid.
Did Idaho State Police Forensics have a contract with this laboratory, Courtroom?
They were the winning bid, though, that process, and so they were under contract with the Department of Purchasing, correct?
Is the contract with the Department of Purchasing that you perform these services and we pay you for them essentially, or does it have more meat to it to talk to some of the things that you were talking about, how you helped develop, I guess, the job description and what would be required?
I'm not really familiar with the Department of Purchasing's day-to-day operations or how they operate. My role was strictly developing that scope of work. We expect them to develop the profiles that could be uploaded to the public genealogy databases. We expect them to provide us a written report. We expect the report to contain certain things, to have a header, to have a date, to list the case number, have page numbers, those kinds of things.
Outside that description of the scope of work and the requirements, did your lab have a separate contract with Courtroom that basically said you agree to these things?
We had that. They won the bid from Division of Purchasing, and that was the state contract for performing that work.
You mentioned a memorandum of understanding you helped facilitate to be signed by the parties. Was Courtroom one of the parties that signed that?
No, this is a memorandum between the law enforcement agencies and the prosecuting attorney's office and the laboratory.
And in that memorandum of understanding, that indicated that the interim Department of Justice, the Department of Justice interim policy applied. Is that right?
I believe it did. I don't have the exact text memorized.
If I showed you a copy of that memorandum of understanding, would that help you remember if that was a part of it?
Yes.
Your Honor, Your Honor, if I have just a moment to gather that, it's not being offered as an exhibit. Just
refreshing.
It's to aid in her memory.
Show it to State's Counsel.
Does looking at that refresh your memory as to whether Department of Justice interim policy applied?
It does say in the first paragraph that it did apply.
And Your Honor, I'm going to refer to Defense Exhibit D19 here and ask the witness be shown that, and then I'll provide the court my copy.
When was this filed?
That would have been filed with the amended Frank's motion on the bottom of that page. I'm sorry.
I've got thousands of filings. I have to go by date to find things. Oh.
I think it was November 18th or the 20th. At the bottom of the page, however, you can see some numbers in red, and those were numbered to make it easier to find.
I just need to find it in the computer first, all right? I found it on my printed documents.
It's the Department of Justice interim policy.
Yes, the Department of Justice interim policy on forensic genetic genealogical DNA analysis and searching.
And in section 7, I believe it's section 7 or page 7, page 7.
Investigative caution, that section?
Let me ask you the question. Are you familiar with the provision in that policy that says if there's a prosecution case, if somebody is arrested and there's a prosecution case, all items in the forensic investigative genetic genealogy should be preserved for court purposes?
I believe that is part of, I don't think it's in section 7. It might be, but I believe that is part of preserving.
Okay, what I want to know is, what did Othram preserve?
I don't know.
What did you get back?
We received a preliminary report. In other cases, we will sometimes get back the DNA extract that was sent to them. I don't recall if we got that back in this case. Anything our laboratory receives, we return to the submitting agency.
Would validation be a part of that? Validation studies?
I wouldn't assume so. I wouldn't assume that would be part of this. No.
Would bench notes be important?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. What notes?
Bench notes, lab bench notes.
Thank you. And then the witness for our lab. Oh, sorry.
Is that you or me?
No, you.
For our laboratory, we designate those part of our case record. I'm not familiar with what Ortham designates as a part of their case record.
So I guess that means you don't have any of those.
No, only the preliminary report.
All right, I will move to a different area of questioning, and it's about the requirements with Othram. You mentioned the goal was to create profiles and create a report, but to search public databases.
Correct. There are public genealogy databases that will allow entry of law enforcement samples, and that is part of the scope of work. They were required to enter it into those databases.
And are you aware there are databases that
Yes.
do not allow law enforcement to search?
Yes.
Were you part of work after Othram began their work to try and do an investigation?
I was not. As far as, I guess I'm unclear. We received evidence submitted to the laboratory before, during, and after all those sections. Is that what you're referring to?
Let me rephrase my question. I think that question was too broad. While Othram was doing their work, were you a part of any work to help Othram? For instance, did you get any documents that you did some research on to try to help Othram?
No.
Were you aware that Othram was just stopped from doing any further work at some point?
I was aware of that.
And was this before they produced any result?
No, we received a preliminary report. I recall receiving that because that's how I know I can approve payment of the invoice. So I know we received that prior to them being told they were stopped.
Were you a part of the decision to stop them?
I was not.
How did you find out about it?
I found out about it in an email from my laboratory system director.
Do you remember when that happened?
I don't recall.
Does the forensic lab continue to contract with Courtroom?
Yes.
If Courtroom had a file that would have validation studies and bench notes, anything they did on this case, who would have received that?
Again, validation studies would be odd to associate with individual cases, so I wouldn't assume they would do that. Again, I'm not familiar with their procedures. And as far as who would receive documents, usually it would be, I would assume, the agency which we received that preliminary report.
You mentioned you're not familiar with the procedures.
No, not in detail, no.
What procedures are you familiar with?
For Ortham,
Yes.
as a part of the bid process, all of the bidders were required to submit. I believe they were required to submit their procedures, and it was essentially just looking over them to say, yes, they have a procedure in place for extracting DNA. Yes, they have a procedure in place for doing SMPs. So yes, they meet the minimums for the invitation to bid. But again, I'm not qualified in that technology, so I wouldn't have studied them or rendered an opinion on them.
I won't ask you for your opinion on them. I won't ask you to quote them to me, but you saw those.
Yes, at the very beginning of the bid process.
Let's switch gears. In the case we're here for today, do you recall there being a trash pull?
And I'm sorry, there being a what? The court reporter is
A
saying that?
trash pull. She didn't hear it.
Huh.
I recall receiving evidence from a trash pull, correct?
What role did you have in deciding anything about that trash pull?
Nothing about the trash pull occurring. I do recall there being a brief, I can't remember if it was a phone meeting or a video meeting, and just being asked in general what items from someone's trash are good for DNA.
Did you give advice?
I don't know if it was me specifically or another member of our DNA unit, but we did offer suggestions to items that are good for DNA.
Did you receive items to test?
Yes.
What instructions were you given about those items?
The discussion was a person of interest had been deployed and to analyze the items from the trash to determine if they could be inclusive of the DNA profile that was developed from the knife sheath unknown male A.
What date did you receive the trash?
The trash was received into laboratory on December 28th, 2022.
So you were looking for a male profile?
Correct.
All right. Did you find male profiles?
I didn't perform the actual testing, but yes, there were male profiles developed.
How many?
I don't know.
Do you know anything about either male profile or any of them?
I believe one of the male profiles designated as E was determined that they could be a biological parent or child of the profile from the knife sheath.
And are you aware that Brian Kober's DNA was in the trash?
I was not aware.
Did you become aware?
I became aware later. We didn't have his name at that time.
You didn't know his name on December 28th?
No, I did not.
Okay, were you on December 28th, were you aware that not male E, but another male profile had been identified?
From
The trash.
the trash pull, I knew there were some mixtures of DNA that were also included.
One of the mixtures, did it have a male DNA profile?
I believe it did.
And wasn't that profile the major component of that profile with minor female?
I believe that sounds correct.
And later, didn't that return to Brian Koberger?
We actually did not perform that comparison.
Did you and I have a discussion a few days ago?
We did.
Did you tell me that you knew that to be Brian Koberger's DNA?
I said I thought it was. and I could not find the report where we had done that comparison. I've since looked through, and we did not make that comparison, so I cannot say that he was included in that mixture. Our laboratory did not do that comparison.
But a DNA profile was made for that mixture, is that right?
Yes.
And there's a minor female and a major male, is that?
That is my understanding.
And you could, by eye, look at that and tell that's Brian Koberger, couldn't you, if you wanted to?
If I wanted to, I could probably look. I did not.
Okay, you could still do it today if you wanted to.
If there was a request to do the comparison, again, we don't do a visual comparison evidence to evidence. Our procedures don't allow us to do that for the probative comparisons.
I need you to help me understand that a little bit. I'm having that question because I understand there was an unknown male B found on lab item 30. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Okay, well, I also understand that there was a cigarette butt taken from somebody in connection with this case investigation. Are you familiar with that?
I am familiar with that.
And that was compared to the DNA on the knife sheath, is that right?
Yes.
And that was found to be excludable. Am I using that word right?
It was an exclusion, correct?
So you compared something that was taken from somebody to an item of evidence, is that right?
Something that was a secondary reference, as in someone identified it as they saw that person using that item. They saw that person dispose of that item. That item was collected and used as a reference sample from that person because there was someone who said that is from that person.
Okay, when you got the trash to go through it in the lab, you knew that you were looking for a male, right?
Correct.
And you knew that the male and his family members lived in a house that produced that bag of trash, is that right?
Yes, but not who produced each individual item in that trash pull.
Okay.
It wasn't labeled, this water bottle is from person of interest. This tissue is from a sibling. This Q-tip is from a parent. We didn't have that information. It was just, here's some items from a trash pull.
Here's some trash. Take a look at it. Okay. And one of those items you took and developed male E?
I did not, but yes, the laboratory did.
In general, the lab developed male E?
Correct.
And compared male A and male E?
There was a paternity statistic calculated because they were both single source profiles, meaning only from one individual.
Okay, and there's another male profile.
That was part of a mixture, to my knowledge, meaning more than one person's DNA present on that item.
Again, only one male, though. Is that right?
So when there's a mixture on an item of evidence, I don't know if you want me to explain the process. The first step is determining number of contributors to that mixture. Then our laboratory utilizes a software program to help break out the components of that mixture. When one individual is male, it is not always possible to say the gender of the second person. Males have an X and a Y chromosome. Females only have an X. So if there's an X and a Y present, it could be one male, it could be two males, it could be a male and a female. Without comparing to known reference samples, I can't say that, and I haven't seen the profile to my knowledge.
Okay, did you tell me, though, on that sample, and I'm talking about 95.9.1, that was a male and a female?
I believe that. I don't know if it was designated as that in the laboratory report. To my knowledge, it was. I can't remember what the report said. Again, I don't generate the report and didn't do the work, so I'm not as familiar with it as if it was my own work.
Okay, male B was also a mixture, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Okay, if it was designated as unknown male B again, I don't know if it was from a mixed sample or not. Your Honor, if I may just have a moment, thank you for that. Just a couple of other questions for you as it relates to male E. It was compared to the sheath, is that right?
Correct. A paternity comparison.
Male E profile was compared to a lot of other evidence items in this case, wasn't it?
Correct.
And you are allowed to do manual interpretation per your policy, right?
If there is, so it's not black and white. So if it is a single source and we can look at it and say that that person is excluded, they are not the source of the DNA, then yes, that can be done manual. And by manual, I mean a person looking at it, if it is a probative comparison. And how we define a probative comparison is if it's saying something about who could be the source of the DNA on an item of evidence that's relevant to the case. Then no, we do not do manual comparisons and issue a statement about that, because all of our standards, we have to issue a statistic so that trier of fact has something to gauge how unique that could be. What is the likelihood that that DNA could be from someone else? We provide that statistic. We don't just say it matches. That requires a statistical calculation, which we use a probabilistic genotyping software to do.
I apologize. I think I got lost in there. Are you telling me because it was a mix, you couldn't have done a manual interpretation on 95.9.1?
Because it's mixed profile and because it was, you're saying it was Brian's DNA, Brian Kober's DNA was present, that would be a probative comparison in that case, which we have to provide a statistic in order to make that statement. In order to deconvolute a mixture, we are no longer allowed to do those manually. Deconvolute as in separate the mixture into its components. We have a software. The software was not designed for, nor was it validated for, doing evidence-to-evidence comparisons.
Now you're speaking my language. Validations are important for integrity, is that right?
In forensics, our laboratory uses validations to ensure any new tool is working properly.
Now, at some point later, your lab issued a report saying matching the DNA on the sheath with DNA taken from Brian Koberger, is that right?
That's correct, and a statistic was provided.
Now, I want to talk about what we're talking about when we say the sheath. You're familiar with what happened with the sheath for swabbing, is that right?
I've seen the sheath, and I don't know how our laboratory, or I know how our laboratory performs swabbing of evidence, but I did not swab that item of evidence, nor did I see it being swabbed.
As I understand it, though, you've read the lab notes.
At one point, I believe I did read the lab notes. I think I was asked a question, and the analyst was out of town or something.
And I think you answered that question to law enforcement after consulting somebody else who was with the swabber when the sheath was swabbed. Is that right?
It's sounding familiar.
If I understand the lab reports, it's a single source on the knife sheath. Is that right?
Correct.
Does that mean it's only one person in that area?
Yes, that was detected through our testing.
Tell me where you think that sheath was swabbed for the purposes of DNA collection.
I believe the analyst swabbed there's kind of a snap or a button that was the top of the snap, and that's the area that was swabbed. There were other areas on it sampled as well.
For the purposes of unknown male A, that you're telling us later came back to Brian Koberger, that's the only place I want to talk about right now. Are we at the top of the button, the outside, or on the inside, the socket portion of the button?
I know on the top. I don't recall if she swabbed the underside or not. I'd have to look at her notes again.
Do you know if that sheath was part of that preserved for fingerprinting?
The swabbing was done first. That's our laboratory standard order of processing. If DNA is needed and fingerprints, they will work together. Essentially, fingerprints will say we can see some possible bridge detail. So if you can avoid this area, after DNA says we want to swab this, and they come to a decision of what would best suit that item of evidence to determine where to swab. So the swabbing takes place first.
I think I don't have any other questions right now. Thank you.
How long do you think you have? I'm just trying to gauge a break here.
I'd say 10 minutes.
All right, let's take a 10-minute break and we'll be back. And unfortunately, Kathy's having some technical issues tonight.
Mhm.
And so, would you guys be, what we can do is we'll go ahead and schedule the part 2 for her to be able to be on. She's having issues tonight with her
Yeah,
internet
that's
and
fine.
stuff.
Yeah.
Just so we can have everybody, and I apologize, with the issues I was even having some myself earlier, but we can break this apart. This is we're on page 75 right now. 75 on page 75, line 19 is where we will end this one, and then we'll do a part 2 coming up. Discuss more of it. Now,
Okay.
it was interesting when it came to the different DNAs that they were all discussing. I couldn't help think of, a couple people from the very beginning we always thought was suspicious, and that was Miss Emma and D. And I couldn't help think about that being a possibility even more from back then. So
Yeah, I don't
very
know.
interesting with and then with them not having his name or not having a link until the 28th. It just shows you even more when I showed this press release. It shows you even more, like December 29th.
They had not, so the lab didn't. Yeah.
They didn't. That's why they were still looking for a 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra. And then you scroll down just a little bit more. No suspect has been identified. Or suspects, because remember, all of those pressers that they did in the month of December, every single one of them, they made sure to mention plural. It was never singular. That's the craziest thing. So how are you telling all of these people after you arrested him that you had him way before? Some of them were even saying at the end of November. How? And then how you can get that information, you get the trash back on the 28th, and somehow you're able to do all of those tests? That's why I feel this statement right here was put out in the morning, and then by later that afternoon into the evening, it was go time to get that arrest on Koberger at 3-4 in the morning Pacific, Pennsylvania time. And how they were able to arrest him the way that they did, when they literally could have followed him to a gas station or even asked him to come in. Hey, sir, can we have some of your DNA? Can we have you take a swab? Now,
Very
he would have lawyered up, of course. Hey, I want to talk to a lawyer. But still, it's crazy when you think of how they were able to apprehend him the way that they did based off of the rush that they had to do. And now it should make you understand even more why the PCA Exhibit A, when you're reading it, it's all over the place. It's because it was literally thrown together at the last minute.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It is. Yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate you hanging out. We'll do part 2. Like I said, I'll figure out with everybody. Yeah, I'll figure out with everybody when we're able to all get back together. I'm available tomorrow night if you guys are, but we can talk about that, and then I'll put out a notification for you guys, and we'll do part 2 and go through the rest of them. I want to say thank you all for being here. Appreciate it very much. Again, here is the link if you want to check out the document yourself. Like I said, we're at page 70, line 19. There's the link for you. I'll be dropping the links to everybody's channels. Please go sub up, and we'll see you on the next show. Thank you, everybody. And thank you guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Is it domestic related? She's calling back. We're going to try to give her a call again, and then she just added another phone number to the 13-year-old grandson who's possibly with the daughter. How about with this?
2412.
First time out.